I didn't know where she was. Oh, good.
Across the windows.
It's not. That's awesome. Or maybe Rachel. Yeah, Kathleen would not be that fast. No. Carol, are we all set? All right. Well, good evening. I call the City of Ferndale Planning Commission meeting of June 1st, 2022 to order at 6:33 p.m. Kyle, would you mind doing a roll call attendance for us?
Commissioner Hagfors.
Here.
Commissioner Azar.
Here.
Commissioner Baker.
Here.
Commissioner Foster.
Here.
Commissioner Akers.
Here.
Commissioner Brazen. And Councilman Polika.
Here.
We do have two absences this evening. Brittany Haskew, who has let us know that she would not be attending for a few meetings, and also Vice Chair Matt Showalter called me this evening, said he wasn't feeling well, so he was not able to make it.
Motion to excuse absence.
Second. There's a motion by Hagfors and a second by Brazen. Yep. All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? All right, that passes. This evening we have two items on our agenda, one item, the discussion item, for our planned Ferndale update. Any comments or edits to the agenda for this evening? If not, a motion to approve.
I would move to approve the agenda as presented.
That is a motion by Baker and a second by Brazen. All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed or abstaining? Sorry, I'm reading slow. All right. Motion passes. And we have next on our agenda the approval of the minutes of the May 18th, 2022 Planning Commission meeting. Did everyone get a chance to review, and do we have any comments or edits to the minutes?
Through the chair, one quick comment. Kyle, good job on the minutes. Like, much more detailed, so we appreciate it.
Any others?
I move to accept the minutes as presented.
Second.
As a motion by Polika and a second by Hagfors. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Abstaining? Motion passes. Well, that was quick.
Almost halfway through.
It's too quick because our discussion item will be a review of the plan Ferndale, our master plan update. Our consultant will be here this evening to give us a presentation. She is running a bit late, but oh, sorry. Thank you. I did forget a call to audience. So for anyone who would wish to speak on items that are not on the agenda, so anything other than the plan that we will be reviewing, we will have time for public comment at that time as well. But if you would like to speak on anything other than that, you can go ahead. Perfect. And sorry I skipped that item.
Thank you. Good evening. My name is Christina Burke. I live at 1059 Withington Street. My property is directly adjacent to the 1200 West 9 Mile development, that's a proposed development. My name's on the site plan. My family has been in this home since 2015. We've owned our home, and before that we owned a home on West Hazelhurst, so we lived in Ferndale for some time. And most of the residents directly surrounding us and in that proposed development are longtime Ferndale residents as well, so their families with young children and senior citizens. Some of my neighbors have grown up in their homes and still live and are raising their families in their homes. So first I want to commend the city's affordable housing initiative. It's much needed, and it's a human rights and social justice issue that I'm very passionate about, so I think that that's fantastic. And I want to note that the best way to address affordable housing is to not create additional need by displacing residents. So I know that the affordable housing plan currently calls for supporting housing for seniors and housing for young families, and so keeping people in place where they're already in their existing is an important point as well. And so in that In that spirit, I have two specific requests regarding the development at 1200 West 9 Mile that's been proposed, and I believe has been approved as well. And so I'm not seeking to block any development or create any conflict, but rather to partner in the spirit of Ferndale, right, and working with our neighbors and keeping the community that we have in that neighborhood that we love so much. The first item is that the proposed 5-foot vinyl fence barrier on the north side and on the east side of the property, that's insufficient in order to address issues of privacy, safety, noise, light pollution, et cetera, from the parking and from the additional influx of renters. I would ask that the barrier be a masonry wall instead of vinyl fencing. I believe that was an earlier iteration of the site plan. And I would ask that it be a minimum of 8 feet tall because the elevation at the property line is actually quite a bit lower than where our homes sit. So anything lower than 8 feet is not going to give us any privacy. It's not going to block out any noise. And so 8 to 10 feet of masonry would be ideal. So that's what I'm asking for. Number two is that given the height of the development at the 4 stories, means having renters looking into our backyards, looking into our homes without any barriers, which is an invasion of privacy and an increase in noise and light pollution. I think you can all agree. It's, again, I'm all for it, but I do ask that they continue to consider that the balconies be eliminated from that north elevation and be moved perhaps instead to the south elevation over 9 Mile, where my understanding is that there is planned green space along that development. It's been moved back from the street, so maybe that would work instead. I don't know, but because my family is going to be losing trees and sky and privacy and having additional people living there, I think that that's a pretty reasonable request that be considered. And that's it. I really appreciate you giving me the time and taking these requests seriously, because we are, it is representative of my neighbors and of the people who are going to be directly impacted by the project. So thank you.
Thank you so much, Ms. Burke. I really appreciate your comments. Just to verify, I wrote down that you had 2 comments, and one was the fence and then the balconies. Okay, never mind.
Correct.
I was just writing too fast.
Right, that the barrier be a minimum of 8 to 10 feet.
And the 8, yeah, masonry.
And that the balconies be moved from the north elevation to either the south elevation or just be eliminated, ideally eliminated completely from that side of the building.
Making sure I
thank
got
you.
that clear. Thank you so much. Appreciate that. Just one further question before we move on. I was wondering, I'm forgetting what our policy was for that development, but we, as it was a by right for the zoning, I don't believe we required a public letter, but I think that in some cases that we do provide the announcement. Did we do that in this case, and did you receive one, Ms. Burke?
I can just note that none of my neighbors received one. We were told by another neighbor very recently within the past couple of weeks that this was even being planned. We had seen surveyors out in the property, but had no communication as to what was being planned. So we actually received or sent the minutes from a previous planning meeting, kind of as a heads up. So
Okay,
yeah.
thank you.
Yeah,
Anything
that
to
is
add there?
correct. I think you're referring to the enhanced
Enhanced
notice.
public notice,
Which,
yeah.
when we took a look at that and I reviewed it, and as I understand it, that's in scenarios where, look at Vester, where R3 is permitted in the middle of a neighborhood, which right now has a bunch of single-family homes, and theoretically one of those homes could get knocked down and several units could be put up there. So as I understood it, the intent was for those types of locations, whereas this was MXD and it's already commercial.
Okay, thank you. Just a further explanation, the law requires a specific amount of notice, thank you. I was going to say an announcement. So we do like a public announcement or like a public notice for specific developments, and there are certain triggers for that legally through the state. This is not a development that would require that. However, then also the city has an enhanced public notice policy, and so the city planner was just saying that as the policy is written, this one didn't necessarily trigger that. But, so I just wanted to confirm that, so, just for an explanation there. All right, now, as I don't see anyone else for a call to audience, we'll move on to discussion of Plan Ferndale.
For contact information?
Oh, good. Good point. I know that I saw you guys connecting before the meeting. Did you receive Ms. Burke's contact information just in case?
I provided my contact information to her.
Perfect. Thank you. Okay. And Kathleen is here, and it looks like we are ready to move on to the draft master plan review.
Great. So, yeah, just real briefly, we've been working on Plan Ferndale for almost a year now, I believe. So I kind of jumped into the middle of this, as you all know. So I want to give a special thanks to Christine Ross in our department, who's been, truly instrumental in getting this done. She's been such a terrific help in our department. And then, of course, we have Kathleen and her entire team at Smith Group, our wonderful consultants, who've created this beautiful and very in-depth and informative plan. So with that, I'll turn it over to her. Thank you for joining us.
Welcome, Kathleen.
I got the PDF up here, and you can scroll through.
Just scroll it. Perfect. Thanks, Kyle. Thanks, everyone. It is good to be here tonight. I apologize for my tardiness. The perks of living 5 minutes
It
away.
worked out perfect.
So today, I'm going to walk through kind of the overview of the draft plan and explain some of our ideas for how we want to open up the plan to the public for their review. I'm going to take this off so that I'm clear. And the hope is at the end of today, if you're comfortable with the draft plan, or with the draft plan with some modifications and revisions, and think it's ready to go to council, then council will can authorize distribution of the plan. And that will open up the review period to make, consensus-based edits, to hear from the public, to hear from all the boards and commissions, and for you to dig even deeper into the plan. So I like to preface this in communities by saying that it doesn't have to be 100%. It can be 75, it can be 95% there. The idea is it in a good enough spot where we're ready to start a more detailed review process. So with that, as Kyle said, we've been working on this for about a year now. We really got kicked off about this time last year and have had steering committee meetings along the way. We met with you and council at an awesome session in September that was really informative, and with some of you and some old faces and new faces here today. And our October community engagement session, the community summit, was pretty well attended, and we got lots of feedback on that. And so since then, pulling all the draft materials together, looking at a variety of different plans and past plans and studies that the city's done. And we're here today where we've met with the steering committee already on the draft plan. They've seen it a couple times and sent us a bunch of revisions, and now we're ready to talk to you. And what will come after that, like I mentioned, discussion with you today, introducing the draft document and revisions that you'd like to see. But our hope is if we follow the schedule, we don't have to. It can be stretched out longer. But we could get it before council at their June 13th meeting. And the idea is that over the summer, people would have time to review it and provide comment. And that state mandated 42-day review process for a plan update. Since we are keeping a lot of your previous plan, then doing that instead of the full 63-day.
Hey, Kathleen, do you mind if I just interrupt you real quick? So you are actually asking us for action this evening or no?
If you want to.
Okay. We just have this on as a discussion item, but I don't think that's an issue that
It's
we
not an actual, action. It's more just yeah, it's looking good. Let's ask council if they take the official action to authorize the distribution. So you just kind of say, yeah, it looks good. You don't have
The
to.
precursor to the council, just to say,
Right.
yeah, we think council will be okay with it.
Yep. And then council says, yep, looks good. Let's send it out. So it's a discussion with you on the draft and ideas and concepts that you want to see.
Thank you.
And sorry, through the chair, council has had this for a couple of weeks now, so we've been reviewing all of this individually.
Thank
So
you.
yeah, and the same, you guys have had the draft and It's the beginning of the review process, not the end of it. I think that's important, important to frame the conversation. Any other quick questions on the potential schedule? Again, these are just, if everything goes according to plan and is timely, it can stretch out farther than that too. So just as a reminder of what Plan Ferndale encompasses, we're using that as kind of an umbrella term to cover the 3 plans that we were charged with updating this year. So that includes both your master plan, which is the primary land use document for the city, a 5-year update of that, a 5-year update of the Parks and Rec plan, and the climate action plan as a new component that's integrated into the master plan as a whole. We were really charged with making sure there was an integrated approach to all of this. And the Parks and Rec plan is published separately, but we were reviewing it at the same time, and its amendment its reauthorization of the new plan was already taken by council in January. But what we're working on right now is a little like memo update to it that just kind of finalizes, because we already like set the stage for how it was going to align with the greater Plan Ferndale process. And so we're just acknowledging that in a minor kind of like update to take into consideration some things that have come up since we've now caught back up with the other 2 plans. So a big component of this was using public feedback. So the last master plan 5 years ago had significant public engagement, and so this time, because so much of that seemed to still stay the same, the public engagement this time was focused more on, during a pandemic, being a bit more flexible with how we were going to get that input, but we had a variety of sources, both online and in person. The boards we probably saw out in the office or in the hallway here of City Hall. Lots of mobile input, a lot of getting the pulse with people via the discussion board, and our plan is to continue that conversation when the draft plan is released. In addition to public input, we looked at data and numbers, and that especially was important in the climate action plan, but using that data as kind of a gauge for where we've been in the last, how things have changed in the last 5 years, and obviously with the census kind of rolling out its numbers over the course of the project, some of these demographic numbers are more recent from the decennial 10-year census, but also looking at everything else that the city's done to date. So you may remember this from when we were here in September, and outlining how all of your different plans had a variety of different goals and objectives and values, and we pulled them all together into 8 guiding principles for the plan. The previous plan had 4, and this now has 8 to incorporate things from the council strategic plan, Ferndale Moves, the downtown possibilities plan, and the housing plan. So these were all concepts that were sprinkled throughout those plans. So letting Plan Ferndale and this master plan be a kind of overarching umbrella that incorporates a lot of those plans and redirects people to those plans where necessary, but trying to come up with new statements around each of these guiding principles so that it's a strong connection to one another. So the plan itself is organized, reorganized, I should say, into 3 main components. So we're calling these the vision elements. So these are the goals, objectives, kind of overarching tools, divided up into people, place, and systems. So each of those chapters, the idea is that those are intended to kind of be overarching to help guide other plans. So in this case, included in this plan are the land use plan and the climate action plan, followed up by an implementation plan. Those are much more action focused, but the idea with the people, place, and systems, those can be overarching principles and ideas and strategies that apply to other city functions and other city plans, and again, references back to the affordable and inclusive housing action plan and Ferndale Moves, and incorporates, and the Parks and Rec plan incorporates those by reference. So the idea is that this is kind of a mega document that helps guide those things. So I'm curious, how much have you all glanced through the plan? Generally, we sent a little kind of set of questions with the agenda, so I was just kind of curious. Oh, Kate, of course, filled hers out. Look at you.
Today.
That's okay. So we know that this
lie.
is a lot to get through, and hopefully this little cheat sheet was just a way to kind of help you think big picture. Did we cover everything? What's missing? Is there something out of place or confusing? Generally, are things where they need to be before we dig into the details, I guess? Just kind of getting a pulse from you on the overall plan would be awesome. And if I need more time to dig into the details, is an acceptable answer too.
The last attachment on the agenda? Was at the end, if you're just going to, it's called Master Plan Draft Review
Clearly, I
Memo.
didn't do it.
That's okay. You were on the steering committee though, so.
That's what I was going to say.
Right, I sent it for the steering committee too, and only got one response. It's for people like Kate, honestly, like that. Yeah, just kidding. It gives them an opportunity to dig in deeper and think about things. No, it's fine. So I guess just in general, I mean, were things what you expected them to be? Were there any surprises? Are there any like big red flags where you're like, oh my gosh, what were you guys thinking? I hope that we vetted all of those out with the steering committee by the time it's gotten to you guys.
Kate has offered to start us off with some comments.
Do you want me to go through? I'll go fast.
Sure.
Sorry, Commissioner Baker.
So the first one, so this is nitty gritty, but I'm just going to go in the order of your questions. Sorry. The list of, again, just in terms of, where you asked about name spelling and things for lists at the acknowledgement section. Joe's listed as the current city manager, but there's no past city
There
manager.
wasn't, that's just a typo.
But then also like city clerk's not listed, finance director, it was just kind of confusing. So it's like partial city staff
okay.
list in one place, and then other city staff were on the steering commission. So that's, it was just,
It's because it's like a Frankenstein from your last plan and us attempting to update it. We'll coordinate.
and I think it probably also coincided with a change in organizational structure.
Yep.
If it wasn't at the last plan, it was right before when a series
We'll
of 5 department
clarify.
heads were consolidated under the city manager. So you've probably got this weird thing with like who used to be council appointee and who didn't. So.
Got it. We'll
That's
confirm
fine.
that.
Okay. I was like, where's the city clerk? So the, so in terms of information and content, is it generally accurate and thorough? It's very thorough. Things that might be missing in my perception, and I did see them noted, but I think that it's really important, and so not wanting to sacrifice the very, very good for the perfect. I realize maybe this is something we wait for to do zoning updates, because it is referred to, but we have this city infrastructure study that's happening that I think is going to have a really important series of recommendations for city facilities. And we sometimes, always, regularly, as a city, forget that the planning commission is like legislatively supposed to be involved in the siting and approval of city facilities. So wanted to make sure that
Yeah.
city infrastructure study, when it's done, we don't just like make decisions about where city facilities go without bringing it to the plan.
I think that page will also evolve because they're working on it right now, right? So my guess is, like, it's already changed like 4 times because they've been meeting and discussing things. So yeah, we'll make note to add the planning commission's role in city facilities.
Improving location, character, and extent. That was drilled into my head when we did the library project of municipal facilities. So, we went through like this whole humongous project process with the library, for example, as part of their capital project a decade ago, but then had like a potential new city DPW facility like come to us as a discussion item that like we totally didn't know about. So I think just broadly making sure that the planning commission is earlier in the process when it comes to location, character, and extent of city facilities.
Got it.
Cool. And then, I don't know how you exactly integrate it into the master plan, but it's going to be important in the next decade, I can tell, because they're all falling down. And then, I think, as much as I've seen accessibility, physical accessibility mentioned in the plan, something, and maybe this is an action item, you can tell me where it's supposed to live. I didn't see anything about really explicitly tying zoning and land use and incentive processes to accessibility. And I think that those are tools that can actually, outside of public investment, can actually really trigger changes in accessibility. I can stop there, so that's 1 and 2, or I can just keep going, Michelle, whatever you want.
Definitely, what would be most helpful?
Let's just stick on this topic of what is accurate and thorough and something important missing. Is it generally accurate and thorough, I should say, or something important
Those
missing?
were the themes that I saw missing. There were a couple specific actions, but those were like the,
We're gonna talk about actions later.
yeah.
Just kind of overall
Very thorough.
feedback.
Very
Very
thorough.
thorough, okay. Is it overly cumbersome in its thoroughness? That's what we're trying to not make it that way.
Fine line, I think.
Right. We're trying to be complete, but trying to strip away some of the language that isn't always as accessible to the average layperson. So definitely, like, if you read it with that eye, that would be helpful too. Any other comments on these two questions?
Through the chair, it's not that important, but it's still important, is on your page 108, where you have the Ferndale Bus Corridors. We do have a bus that runs down Hilton now, so that should probably be
Okay.
added for it.
That's important.
Yep.
It's an important north-south. Does it run the entire length, or does it?
It will run all the way up
Okay.
Hilton to Campbell.
Perfect.
Yep.
Yeah, it goes up into 11
Goes up
mile?
Monroe.
All the way up
Goes all the way up
Campbell?
to Troy, yeah.
Oh,
Wow.
to 14 Mile Road.
Even beyond that, goes up to like Long Lake and Cross.
Really?
Yeah, it kind of jumps around a little bit, but it's pretty much Campbell, Hilton, and then up Maine.
That's great,
Yeah, okay.
So,
great.
Anything else on the transportation side, Commissioner Hackers?
nothing major that jumped out at me on the transportation aspect aside from that thing.
I'll say we tried to not just recap everything that was in Ferndale Moves either, because knowing that that was adopted last year, like, it's likely to change again before this next plan. So adopting or incorporating references, and make sure you check out this, knowing that that is a live site that's likely to evolve and change over time.
All right, next question?
Sure. Is the next question, is the overall vision provided with the steps to get there? Is it that one?
Yes.
Okay, so we're gonna go through the goals, and you can let me know if you have specific, comments on those. But overall, do you feel like the vision and the story and the narrative, the through line is there of why we're doing things the way we're doing?
I'm sorry, through the chair, I missed one item for the two questions before, and this is probably more of a question to you to see if it's even a possibility, is when you go into the data about like the population, the race composition, whatnot, I don't know if the data is even available, but I would be curious to see what our population composition of LGBTQ is.
I'm not
No.
sure that's available.
I don't know if it is either.
If someone knows,
Yeah,
I think because it's a self-reported kind of.
Yeah, and I don't even know. I think they used to have it actually on demographic information. I believe when the census came out, I believe that was omitted.
We'll do a quick
based on the
search.
administration.
The last one, because we could tell from the Obama one,
Exactly.
but not from the Trump one.
So if the data is available, that may be good, talking about the inclusionary aspect of the city. It would be good to kind of see where the population of that is going.
Yeah.
And maybe even in relation to our communities around us, to see if, we used to kind of be known as quote unquote the neighborhood, but is that still the case anymore? Or are there barriers to entry now?
Percentage-wise, actually, Pleasant Ridge has a higher percentage of LGBT individuals, but we have more people.
Yeah, of course, yeah.
Happy Pride.
Happy Pride.
First,
It is June 1st.
I haven't changed out all my rainbow stuff yet. That's a great observation. I'm not sure it is, but we'll figure out some way to at least acknowledge it. Okay. Let's talk about these goals. So again, each of these sections, people, place, and systems, we tried to group these things based on themes and how people tend to like access a plan. And so I think we heard loud and clear from the public, especially during the community summit, that the character of Ferndale is defined by its people. And so by having a whole section dedicated to that, we're trying to give it that weight. The downside is that that's not typically something that's in a master plan. And so we had lots of conversations with the steering committee, and I will preface that by saying some of this is covered in your previous plans, but not a lot. And so if there's a section where we can get more like input and feedback to craft new language that is specific to Ferndale, it would be this section. We were able to pull a lot from your previous plan into the place and systems chapters, but and we've had some of the commissions help with some of the language here, but I think this will continue to be the emphasis of during the public review process of trying to really pinpoint what are the key things that define Ferndale's people. So in this section, the topics are community identity, livability, civic engagement, arts and culture, and health and well-being. So anyone have any comments on these goals or any of their accompanying objectives or the section in the plan? Just broadly on this topic.
Back to the right spot in the packet. Want my people section open. Come on. I didn't have any notes on it.
Kathleen, I know you've been here a few times to present to our planning commission, but I don't know if you're aware of, we have the
Yeah,
TVs up there.
I forget, but thanks for the reminder.
Yeah, if you wonder why we're kind of like
Yeah,
staring
we're
out.
not staring in space.
We're not staring at nothing.
We're looking at your presentation.
I was going to let you read them. I can read them aloud if I need to.
Oh, I know the only question I had on people.
Okay.
I just thought of it. And again, I don't know that SEMCOG makes this level of data available, but you note a couple times that SEMCOG is projecting a population increase over the next 2 decades.
They always do.
I know, and I wondered first if that had anything to do with the additional number of housing units that have been added, or if it's independent of that. It's probably independent. And was also then wondering if they give any granular data about where they think that population is that from in-migration? Is that kids that are being born? I don't know if they get that granular, but I think if for example, they said, we think your under age 10 population is going to go up by 5% in the next.
We can look at
that
the
would be really
methodology.
interesting, but I don't know if they or if you think that SEMCOG's projections are always either rosy or inaccurate, then perhaps it's not.
I do. I think in general, we also can't take into account things like, I don't know how they decide with like the 2008 recession, with the pandemic is going to impact how people move. So I always say take those projections with a grain of salt. I think the big thing to take away from the demographics is that the number of households is increasing and the household size is decreasing.
But
Hence
our average Ferndalean is 35 and that's a high income, so are they having children?
right, so we're not seeing a ton of, you have lots of single, lots of double households where there aren't necessarily kids. So I think that's the general trend we're seeing. And whether that continues or changes, TBD, but I think we're kind of assuming that's been the trajectory for a while.
I'll tell you, our school district is predicting an increase in
Right.
pupils. So I
Right.
was interested then when I saw that broadly SEMCOG was projecting an increase, and then knowing our demographics, it seems like people have sort of stayed. We were heavy in like the 25 to 35 category, and now we're heavy in
It's
27 to
like the
40
baby boom
categories.
echo, right? Like the baby boomers are
It
grandparents
absolutely
now.
is, yes.
Like,
So, but I like that it shows that people have kind of stayed over the last 2 cycles of census. So just knowing that the school district is preparing for an increase in students, demographically, we know that we have fewer people, yet SEMCOG says we're gonna, it was just kind of like a brain
Right.
twister.
We've added, sorry, go
Oh,
ahead.
sorry, is the increase though of students necessarily Ferndale resident students, or is that also school of choice students? Because I think that
Great
makes up a
question.
huge composition of our school district as well.
It's a great question. So the number of student spaces available is relatively fixed, and then it kind of fluctuates between, if we get a higher percentage of in-district students, then the proportion of school of choice students decreases. So broadly, overall, they were saying we should be prepared for an increase in students broadly for the next 20 to 30 years. But, I mean, there were like 5,000 people at Ferndale High School when my dad graduated, right? But like,
yeah,
you know, like 2,100 when I did, and now like 1,200. So I clearly the trend is going the other direction. It was just kind of, that's why my brain went, like,
Yeah,
And I think that's,
who are these people and how do we plan for them? Because we talk about seniors a lot.
Right.
We talk about kids a lot.
yeah.
the seniors are more obvious
Yeah.
because a lot of them are already
And
here.
have been here. Yep.
But I think that this gets down to some of the crux of some of the heartburn of the last few years is how or if Ferndale should quote unquote grow, right? And are people wanting to move here? Why are they wanting to move here? I mean, we all know it's a desirable place to live. I live technically one suburb over, but I consider Ferndale my backyard. Like, I want to be near it. So I don't know, it'll be interesting with the public to see if we're capturing that sentiment, because I think, you know, statistically where the population is going, it's like, if we want to really be welcoming and inclusive, that means more people, but like not too many more, but like, how do you like welcome everyone and not, you know, exclude people from that? So I think policy-wise, it'll be interesting to get into the nuance of that, probably more at the city council level, but like, when we're adopting this plan, to acknowledge that things are changing and how does that impact our land use decisions for you guys at the planning commission level, in trying to figure out where it makes sense to have more housing units, for instance, which we'll talk about in a second.
Or the size of housing units, yeah.
Yeah, through the chair, I think that the general rule of thumb is that, you know, mobility and safety and other improvements or plans that are good for seniors are also good for young people, right? But the housing units actually was sort of specifically my question. Yeah.
Yeah, for sure. Differences, different needs there.
Yeah. Kids and seniors have similar needs in some spaces, but not always.
And benefit from being in proximity with one another. Very much studied that.
They all are a little bit slower across the street, right? Like it. You know.
Any other big comments on the people section? Anything we're missing or good to go? Place. So this is a lot of the land use stuff gets into place. The more we go down, we get into more of the details. The next section on systems is even more transitioning into like climate action plan. So this has a lot of land use overlap. But we tried to zoom back out and be like, how does place impact other plans, like the housing plan, Ferndale Moves, Parks and Rec, right? So being more holistic, so this isn't just about land use, it's about what defines your neighborhoods and defining what that means, and the walkability, the 20-minute neighborhood, really, again, the merging of people into place. So the topics covered in this chapter are housing, economic vitality, built environment, parks, open space in the environment, and accessibility and connectivity. Any big comments on this section? Or ideas or thoughts?
The chair, I was curious about if this was a really meaty part of your discussions, if place was kind of a big part
Yes.
the steering committee wanted to talk about. I'd be surprised, but that was.
I think it was. I don't know.
Yeah.
I think
I mean, like Kathleen said, we also talked quite a lot about people and, yeah.
I think that this, because it incorporates so much of your other plans and pulls a lot from your existing plan, the 2017 plan, and sets you up for the land use plan and starts to set you up for the climate action plan, it gets a little meatier than the people section. But yeah.
Through the chair, I think with the housing topic especially, I think it kind of does a good job on bringing up the discussion that we kind of had about accessory dwelling units possibly, because I think that, you know, as we talk about like in the discussion also talks about, you know, making homes maybe more sustainable with, you know, solar panels and geothermal or whatnot, but that kind of technology then kind of pushes out the whole affordability aspect. There's no way you can build a unit like that and then say it's going to be affordable for someone who works at a restaurant downtown. But when it comes to accessory dwelling units, those units can only go so much up in rent, because of just the sheer size of the fact that someone will only pay so much to live in someone's backyard, pretty much.
Right.
So I think that was a good addressment to the housing affordability aspect that kind of offset the big push for more green architecture, which there's no such thing as affordable of at this time.
I will say that there are there are some short-term benefits and long-term benefits for some of the green packaging based on if you need to replace your water heater. It's starting to get more comparable with incentives and rebates and things like that, and that's where I think some other pots of money can come into play to help meet those ambitious climate targets. That effectively over the long term, switching to some of that stuff does definitely reap the benefits, but it's those upfront capital costs. So I think trying to balance that fine line between affordability and sustainability. That's why they're both values. That's why they're guiding principles in the plan, because they are both important, but sometimes you have to make those trade-offs.
I just have a quick process question to Kathleen. Are we going to are we just talking about goals right now, and we're going to come back and talk a little bit about each category, or if I have a question about like the housing category?
We're going to talk about housing.
Cool. Never mind.
I have a separate slide on housing.
I'm sorry then.
No, you're good. No, you're good.
Okay.
You're good.
I had like 4 as well, so.
Okay.
No, we called that out as something specific that we wanted to talk about with you.
So I have I've been debating whether or not to bring this up, but, so in the parks, open space, and environment is encompassing of this, I know this, but what I thought was sort of potentially lacking was just like using like a word comparable or of like nature, of like actually, I mean, environment, it does encompass that, but like the natural environment, we don't necessarily talk about, and that's probably because we are a well-established suburb that doesn't have a lot of natural space that is untouched. However, I know that residents would like that, and so part of the area, one of the redevelopment areas that we have, Hazelemmers, or however it's pronounced, I know that the neighborhood group that was pretty active in discussing that project and kind of the negative effects of developing that space is it'd be taking some of like our biggest like kind of natural area away. Of course, we know that it is contaminated, and that is part of the issue with being such a developed kind of compact space. But something I think this also is important. So
Yeah, I think we can weave that into the nomenclature there for sure.
Codifying natural space preservation.
natural space preservation is what Kate just said.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I
So
was similar
we
to
can.
about codifying tree preservation, making it harder to forest. Maybe even funding the acquisition of priority tree canopy spaces, or programming those the city already owns, Livernois 8 Mile.
How is your current tree preservation ordinance working?
Not in the zoning ordinance, so I don't know it that well.
Well, so for development, we have,
I mean, I know it within development, but I don't know how the tree fund gets allocated.
or how it gets allocated, like programmed.
Yeah.
I'm not sure,
I'll
but
have
in
to
terms
look.
of development,
We plant them in neighborhoods. So, like this year, we planted over 100 trees this spring to whoever wanted trees in front of their houses. Instead of people buying them for $125, if you wanted one, you got one.
But in past years, there's been discussion about, if a development in a certain neighborhood pays into the tree fund, then the trees, that are planted will try to stay in that neighborhood. Like for a while, that was kind of.
I think that was a
That I meant, I don't know how.
a goal. I don't know how realistic that management-wise that was. It would take a fair bit of someone to say, oh, well, we had this development and that needed 4 trees, so now we have to manage where these 4 trees are going to be planted to make sure that it stays within that neighborhood, so.
That's just what I meant when I said I don't know how it actually rolls out.
One, then the definition of what's the neighborhood too. You know,
True.
you could have a building, you know, at 9 and Woodward on the southeast corner. Does that mean the whole southeast quadrant? Does that mean the first 3 blocks in both directions? And, you know, what's,
I mean, downtown.
yeah, exactly.
But if we're really serious about tree canopy, which we've invested a lot of time, money, and energy in at the council level, and about preservation of natural spaces, that was a really great word to use. And again, this might not be a zoning ordinance thing, but something about codifying, whether it's tree preservation or tree canopy preservation, just making it harder to just pay into the tree fund.
Let me ask, Davy Tree is your consultant on that, and they helped us with the tree canopy section in particular, so I'm gonna ask them how the stuff is going and what they might recommend if there's anything else.
I wish that we could do more to encourage private property planting of trees and replacement of trees, because, you know, we have the control over, you know, the public spaces, but a lot of people are just cutting their trees down and they're not replacing them.
Any number of reasons.
Yeah.
Sometimes they don't want one.
Yeah.
Or the insurance.
Or they wanna put solar panels in.
Our neighbors, multiple fell on cars in just the last couple of years, so.
Yeah.
There's a lot that are coming down recently. I
Let
think
me-
education is a big part of that, and
Yeah, let me ask Davy for those specific questions and see what we can weave in.
There was an action item, council member, about creating a Ferndale tree nursery or something, so that might
Yeah.
be a little. No, that might be
I've
a
been
little
pushing for
closer-
that for 8
I know.
years.
And they're
A
like,
little closer to a private, you know, a private property, right? So there's like, there's this pot of money for public reforestation.
Right.
But if there's another avenue, I don't know.
No, I understand what you're saying.
I know you have Arbor Day trees. Talk about that.
I love my Arbor Day trees.
maybe an action item of following up on that actually would be
Right.
sufficient, yeah.
Yeah.
I'm
sorry.
pretty sure the comment we got from city staff was, we know this is a priority, but we're not sure how to like get it funded and working, so if you have suggestions, Councilman, I'd
I've made suggestions and it's like, oh yeah, that's really nice, and then nothing ever happens.
Well, let's make sure it's a top priority, so if it's a holdover from your
Well,
last
but see,
plan.
then it gets into council setting priorities in March, you know, for the next, you
Right.
know, the next period. And when we go and put our red dots on the things that we want to support, mine gets a dot out of 5 dots.
The lobby, sir. Work those
Understood.
phones.
Okay,
That might have been too granular. Sorry.
No, I think I brought
I
up,
had the same note as you did.
so systems, again, some of this is covered in your past plan, but we also wanted to write overarching goals that set you up for the climate action plan, right? So that the climate action plan isn't just coming out of nowhere, that this is why we want to do these things for resilient reasons. So we've got energy, water, waste, transportation, and communication as the different system infrastructure things. Perfect, thank you,
My
yes. I have to
first-
grab my notes.
oh, thanks, Kyle. My comment would be, rather than water, to have just natural resources, to talk about water, air, just natural resources in general. Seems like a shame to talk about water, but not to talk about air or other.
Yeah, it's embedded in a lot of them. But yeah, we can, these are also things that are directly, like, or sort of indirectly, but most of them are things that what the city can influence.
Yeah, we control the water, you know, the water supply, you know, but we really can't control the air.
It's like a secondary of some of these, but we'll make sure that it gets strengthened in there.
And I think some of that is gonna be in the environmental sustainability portion for air.
So I mean, it's really talking about water infrastructure rather than the actual.
Right.
Yes, yeah. Yeah, I think they're using the
I mean, that
term
makes
systems
sense.
instead of infrastructure.
Yep.
The chair? I learned by watching Canadian reality television that apparently,
Show?
Vancouver, Dragon's Den, apparently Vancouver has a pretty aggressive deconstruction and reuse ordinance for any, definitely any residential demolition, and they may have just expanded it. But I mean, like 80% needs to be diverted from the waste stream. Like it's seriously aggressive. And
Wow.
it has spawned, the reason it was on Dragon's Den is it has now spawned new industries around reclamation and reuse. So if one of the things that we talk about in systems is waste, and then we get into deconstruction and codifying that in the action steps. So I just wanted to point out that television told me that Vancouver
Yeah, let
has
me look at
something
that.
that might be good to Google if we want to make a note of it at the planning department or whoever's going to be assigned to that.
It's also Claire Dion, your waste, I don't know, what's her title? Waste,
Zero waste coordinator?
Zero Waste Coordinator? So that's right up her alley.
And she can Google it.
Is there, yeah, I was gonna say, is there a specific term like construction reclamation? or-
There is, yeah, deconstruction.
Deconstruction,
and
reclamation.
waste stream diversion, yeah.
It's a whole thing. Often we have that in there as an action. I'm surprised we forgot it this time,
No, I
so.
think you do have it as an
Oh, do we?
Yeah.
Oh, we just need to set it up here.
I just wanted to, because it was mentioned multiple times, that's why I wanted to make sure I
Make sure it's
mentioned
in this.
Vancouver resource.
And look at
whatever
Vancouver,
staff
okay.
member would know to Google Vancouver.
I will tell Claire to Google Vancouver.
That's all.
Huh.
Through the chair, one of the ways to educate the public about the recycling process, and I don't know if you can even just voice it right in here, is putting a simple label on the recycling bin to say this is what you recycle, this is what you don't. And I mean, I can even see my neighbor directly on both sides of me. I've seen hoses, I've seen trash bags of recyclables, even though they should just throw it in there. And I think a lot of people, they don't go through the process of actually going and say, what does my recycling take? They just say, I'll just throw it in there and they'll deal with it,
Right.
which then ultimately could ruin the entire load of recycling that's taken. So, and I know my mom lives up in East Lansing, and their recycling bins come with labels on all of them that just say, this is what you put in here, this is what you don't,
Right.
you know.
I think the problem with doing that is that it changes regularly too. Like, I know what Sakra takes. Like, I literally just made my recycling appointment for Saturday, and I'm like, are they taking batteries right now?
Yeah.
Who knows, right? So I think part of that is the Environmental Sustainability Commission is working on educational materials. That sounds like a key thing that at least comes in your water bill, and you know, I regularly get reminders of what can and cannot, but I think that's a good point, is education.
Education.
Continued education. It can't just be like a one-time
Yeah, and
thing.
it can't even be just like, oh, we put it on our Facebook. It's like, I don't use Facebook, so I would never see that.
Right, like newsletter, email, like multiple ways.
Put it on the water bill. I don't get the water bill. I get it emailed, so I don't look at it, you know.
Right.
It needs to be everywhere pretty much so people know.
Yeah, I think education is,
I will say Sakra has a very cool, it's like a waste
The Waste Wizard.
wizard,
Yeah.
thank you.
And yeah, it's a great app.
And again, because it changes all the time, what they're taking.
I mean, this is really not related to what we're doing, I apologize, but I'm just going to kind of go off that as, when I worked in Northwest Michigan, we did regional planning, and so I managed the regional, like, recycling and waste management team, and we had a rock star up in Emmett County. She now works for the state doing recycling, and we got a tour of her facility and really got educated about the recycling process and everything, and it really is eye-opening, and I think education is such an important factor that we really could do a lot more, so.
I think your FESC is primed and wanting to do that, so we have a couple kind of how-to guides that are accompanying the climate action section too, that we worked on with them, so that'll help.
Awesome.
Anything else on systems? All right, let's talk about land use. So we added this diagram, again, to try and think, because it used to be called your master land use plan, and we're trying to break you all of that habit because it's about so much more than land use. And land use itself is very interdependent upon a variety of different factors. And so thinking about land use as a culminating chapter that takes elements from all those previous plans and kind of brings them together. And these are things that impact how your decision-making primarily as a planning commission. You're going to theoretically use this chapter a lot. I think a couple of you have alluded to it, future zoning changes, right? We used that a lot when we updated the downtown and the mixed-use districts and the industrial districts, so much so that we were able to check them off and not include them in this plan, right? Done, done, done. Those are great things that we like to have. So we wanted to kind of set the stage with this diagram to help drive home some of those points about education too, about why transportation systems, for instance, are really directly tied to land use decision-making, especially when it comes to transit-oriented development and some of the more ambitious things that I think both are happening and will be happening along Woodward especially. So let's talk about your future land use plan.
Sorry, through the chair really quick. Go back to your diagram. It's a small little comment, but I still think it matters, is for your mobility, you have a train showing. The train won't be going up Woodward. I don't ever see that happening, but maybe
Sure.
doing like a bus image or
Or
something.
a bike.
That's more realistic to where I see
Yep.
the future going.
Cheers.
I don't want people thinking the queue
We do
line's
have
coming
a
all the way
train
up
that
here.
goes through.
That's our
We do. It doesn't stop, but unless they want to stop traffic, but it doesn't pick you up on the way.
This is being aspirational because
Yes.
we all know that we're streetcar suburbs and we really do want rail.
That would be fantastic. I just hope it's never the queue line.
We'll change it to a more inclusive icon that's a little more realistic.
Thanks.
So, land use. I didn't go through and make a diagram, I can if you need it, that shows what's changed. I think I can basically summarize in a quick second of what's changed since your last plan. And I will say that I would appreciate your review of the accompanying text that accompanies the proposed future land use map, because we really overhauled that. So we tried to give you more teeth in there for future policy decision making. What has changed that is kind of big is we split industrial into two categories. Because you have the two zoning categories, you do really have different industrial needs, and we wanted to help emphasize that the character of those areas is likely different, but also the intensity of uses. We wanted to both protect the more light industrial areas. I think it's manufacturing in your ordinance, am I right? Or is it industrial? Either way, trying to respect how your current zoning works and let them be distinct. There were some changes to West 9 Mile. We just changed, it was, I think, the urban residential was shown kind of west of downtown from Livernois to the border. We just showed it as that mixed use category because that's what your existing zoning is, and we still think that makes sense to have a mixture of both housing and commercial needs. I think those are the biggest changes. I'm just reflecting. Again, what's changed the most is the text. And so with that, we did, here's the housing that we wanted to talk about.
Through the chair, sorry.
Yeah.
On the land use, and I don't know if this is something that you guys would address or if it's even anything, but you have that light industrial 1 down by 8 Mile where the rail yard is. I don't think that's ever going to be anything other than heavy industrial now at this point, but I don't know.
Right,
if
this
that's something.
triangle.
No, I would disagree.
Would you call that light industrial
Yeah,
still?
because it's not like gauge. It's not, it really is. And some of it's actually commercial, like the lighting place where you can buy light bulbs.
On Fair Street?
Yeah.
And I think it
Yeah,
is,
that
that's
really
still
is-
listed commercial.
That's
I
really
think.
all kind of Fair Street,
Okay.
businesses, and that's and that's really, I know the neighborhood would not want a heavy industrial.
I live by that, and I feel like it's heavy industrial with how loud it is now. It's not.
Well, that's because of the railroad,
Well, it's for the freight yard though, with the
Yeah.
lifting of the crates, and then when you
Yeah.
see the amount of truck traffic from 8 Mile that's in that zone now too, like that will, yeah, this spot feels more like,
Fair Street,
no, like.
Just that triangle piece.
Yeah,
I see.
because it just, looking at the definition and thinking about like, this is industrial 1 and the type of traffic coming from that zone, But knowing what's going on here, that does not feel like industrial.
But should it in the future? That's the thing to keep in
Yeah.
mind, that this isn't existing, this is what it should be in the
Yeah,
future.
I mean, honestly, I don't think it would be anything other than
mean-
that at this point.
At this point, it really is just vacant. I mean, it's, that whole area is predominantly, except for that one little side street of residential, it's all owned by the rail yard.
Yeah.
And I don't see it really changing, but if they chose to sell that property, I'd much rather see it be done as light industrial than heavy industrial.
To that end, we understand that 1 is light and 2 is heavy. Is that something that, for a layperson in the key, in the legend, as we were talking about, that we would want to call it a light industrial and a heavy industrial for
We
a
didn't
reader?
want to confuse the terms of future land use with your actual zoning categories. So we tried to call them comparable things, but just different enough so that it's clear that we're talking about future land use and not talking about zoning. So I'm pretty sure it says in the description, heavy uses like la-da-da, and light uses like la-da-da. But we can, we were trying to keep it a little more neutral in the actual naming, but we can change it if that's your preference.
And so our previous future land use map only had the 1 industrial section. but
Right.
Our current zoning does have the 2.
Right.
I understand now, okay.
And then with the industrial though, you just have the 1.
Yeah, and it's just, and I think it's literally in the uses, it's split between 1 and 2 where it says heavy versus light.
A potential for industrial infill and adaptive reuse of traditionally industrial spaces to serve office and retail uses is industrial 1 development opportunity. But so what were you saying, that it's actually defined as 1 and 2 or?
I thought we had it split in the table under the,
I might be looking in the wrong section.
how do I,
The plan type, the type just says 1 industrial, it doesn't have separate ones.
thought,
It does under development opportunities.
yes, so,
Do.
thank you.
So what I just read was the industrial 1 development opportunity, then industrial 2 development opportunities, heavier industrial uses south of 9 Mile,
Yeah.
which,
Adaptive reuse.
Purple, there you go.
Yep. We can clarify the use mix. Yes, he says heavier and more lighter. That was the distinguishing. We can call them heavy and light industrial because your zoning is M manufacturing 1 and 2, if that would help. And then I'm gonna clarify the uses a little bit more in the development.
Maybe just a little more common language.
kind of like defining that the externalities are different between the two.
And the impacts, and that's the biggest thing, is the intensity.
So we do talk about housing opportunities in the industrial area. In the previous plan, there was like a big call out about how industrial should remain industrial, and it was very specific. And I know that there's some similar language about how we should maintain the industrials. And I know that we have similar language in our zoning ordinance about like loft spaces and industrial. I just want to be very careful about that. I think we need to really preserve our industrial space, and especially with how development is now. I think that residential development can really change the economic value of industrial space and really prevent future industrial growth. And I'm not really, in my opinion, I don't think we should really promote housing in the industrial district. I think that it can potentially be done correctly, but in very, I think, probably rare instances. And I feel like if we have language that says that there is opportunity, that every housing developer is going to try very hard to take that opportunity because there is cheap
Right.
land that they can get a lot of benefit out of, which prevents the future industrial benefit.
Especially when you're talking about lofts, because that suggests adaptive reuse.
And that was definitely heavy in your last plan, was the loft concept.
Right.
but very limited in our actual zoning
Right.
interpretation.
So we can delete that. We can look at what's in zoning and make it align better, since you've already kind of, just to make this more refined, that it's only in particular, to try to align the language to be closer. Or just, we can delete it too. We definitely changed those sections, Madam Chair, in the previous section on redevelopment. So we definitely lessened the language from the last plan here on this page, 104, on the housing stuff. So I guess that's, I mean, if anyone else has a comment on that, now's the time to help us figure out how strongly you want to either encourage or discourage.
In my opinion, I would welcome everyone else to opine, is that I think, you know, because we do have the housing opportunities, it's consistent with the other sections, so I wouldn't recommend just like removing housing opportunities, although like in open space you just say NA. I would probably more so just like say that, you know, that there's value in maintaining the industrial use and highly limiting the residential, or something kind of watered down. That's not necessarily saying we don't want any housing, because I don't know if that's the way we want to go, but that would be my recommendation. I know that we've talked about having, you know, the mixed use along the corridors.
Right.
So
That was going to be one, I could just say along X, Y, and Z corridors.
that's quite a lot of real estate as well,
Right.
so.
Okay, this is where I rely on you to keep me sane. Do we allow light industrial in the heavy industrial, or is heavy industrial just heavy industrial?
I would have to look at your zoning ordinance.
I think the use is allowed, I
I
believe
think
the
they're
use is
allowed,
allowed in M1 or 11.
Okay, okay.
Yeah,
So
there's-
we could still promote more light industrial use and encourage the heavy industrial to be replaced by light industrial over time, rather than encourage more heavy industrial to move into the heavy industrial area. I mean, safety-wise, wouldn't we, I mean, don't get me wrong, Gage has been a wonderful, you know, a company, you know, they're, you know, one of the largest employers in the city, but what they do is dangerous to our community. They're dealing with chemicals, and we've had chemical spills there, and they've been very responsible, and that's not what I'm trying to say is push out good businesses, but as businesses leave or move out, to promote more light industrial than just replace a heavy industrial business with another heavy industrial business.
I think that would be a natural transition already. I think based on the way the demand is, I mean, a heavy industrial, if they find that property to still be valuable, they would move in, but I think naturally a light industrial would move in probably quicker depending on the situation. Depending on the structure, I think there's really, again, only those two main sites that it's only a certain company that would look at a site that large.
Yeah.
Everything else, though, really could be very interchangeable with light industrial.
There are small, heavy industrial facilities. If you go down some of these side streets, they're
Foundries.
small.
Yeah.
But the problem is that the type of business that they do has really kind of destroyed the property. So a lot of light industrial businesses aren't going to want to go into where a tool and die shop was, where there's oil that's been spilled, you know, on the property for years. They're going to want a cleaner environment. And so I'm wondering if we should encourage more of that when a heavy industrial business, and I don't know if that's done through brownfields, or is brownfields just done in certain circumstances, you know?
Brownfields are part of the circular regulatory program. And that's a US EPA situation. That would be a situation by situation basis, I believe.
Okay, so it's not restricted to particular sites or businesses or,
No.
Through the chair, I think we're seeing light industrial to manufacturing with auxiliary retail and perhaps auxiliary residential evolution already. And as you pointed out last time, these are smaller buildings that are, you know, sort of easier to manage. When it comes to the heavy industrial, I don't really have any background or experience to help you evaluate that, right? Because what we've got in our community in Metro Detroit are abandoned heavy industrial sites, right? So regardless of what they're zoned, they're still either so large, so toxic, or the use is so irrelevant that they don't get redeveloped, right?
Yeah.
So I don't even know how to incorporate your forward thinking into the future land use.
Yeah, well, I
just
think
don't know.
like Russell Industries, you know, where it was this heavy industrial building, and now you have all these little businesses that have decided to pop up in there. You know, some commercial, some light industrial.
That's what urban
But-
rest is.
Yeah, yeah. But I don't think that was that a major
Oh, yeah,
heavy industrial?
Yeah.
absolutely, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, I wish I had something better to offer you. Like, I just don't know how, like, so Midwest Wire Products, right? So like, we just saw a presentation from a housing developer and basically like an experience builder developer come to talk to us about the Ice House, which is Midwest Wire Products. You know, like, that's a filthy dirty site that, you know, potentially through, you know, state and local contributions to cleanup efforts could become something different, new, exciting. And there's a zoning process to go through for those special, one-of-a-kind sorts of, you know, properties. So if, heaven forbid, we needed to think about, you know, redevelopment of Gage products, I think that's when, you know, someone would come to us perhaps for a rezoning or a PUD or something to try to reuse a special property in a special way.
Valentine Distillery
Yeah.
repurposed out,
Well, that's- yeah.
very dirty.
That was actually
LTP.
Brass. That was,
It was
why can't I
LTP.
think of his name?
Oh, the site owner, I don't know.
He's the one that owned it, and then through our department, found other people to move in there, Allied Printing
Guy who
for
was just
storage, and Valentine to do their distilling there, and I think there's another company that's in there.
The guy who's expanding, who was just here.
And yeah, that's the brass forging, yeah. So it's kind of a mix. I mean, you have brass forging, which is heavy industrial, and then you have Valentine Vodka, which is distilling right next door.
Through the chair, to get back onto the housing opportunities language. No, that's fine. I just want to make sure we address this. One thought could be the simple word change of, instead of transition to, maybe say incorporate. So that way it's saying that the industrial use is still, the industrial development is still the focus on that, but it could incorporate live-work units and/or loft units. So that way, that word choice is saying that anytime a developer comes, they're not just saying, I have an industrial site, I'm gonna make these into lofts. They're saying, I have this industrial site, I'm gonna have, you know, a light manufacturer come in, but they're gonna be a couple of live-work units up top,
Which is permitted.
which is permitted, yeah.
Through the chair, just for a quick point of clarification, so the only residential that we allow right now in our industrial zoning districts is upper level residential is with the special land use in M1.
Yep.
We don't allow anything at all in M2.
And did we define what upper level meant? Because we had someone come
Yeah.
in with, like, they went up like 3 steps or something. It was like 18 inches, and they said, yeah, that's our upper level.
I think that's a zoning issue, but I just want to make sure that we do have a clarification of what we also want for the future. So even though that's our zoning now, then
That's
what do we
helpful
want
to
to?
know. So right now, it's, are you okay, and that's a special land use? So right now, it's a special land use to allow residential above the first story, we'll say that, above an existing business, but it's a special land use, only in M1, not in M2. Is that good going forward, or do we want to encourage or discourage housing in M1? Or limit its location?
Yeah, I mean, I think using the idea of incorporate really gives the guidance of M1. We're saying we don't want people just to come in and find cheap property they want to make in the housing. However, being realistic that if this is a zone catered to maybe a small manufacturer or small artisan or whatnot, that there's the potential of incorporating like a live-work type unit in the facility where they still have their industrial M1 main use, but they could also live there as well.
Studio, gallery.
Jewelry, yeah, anything like that.
Can't you dictate what percentage? So you could say 15% residential, 85%.
Yeah.
We don't have to get to that level of
Yeah,
specificity.
but just on the sentence alone,
Right.
I don't like the word transition to, because then someone could come in and say, well, I have an industrial site, I'm going to transition this to
Right.
high-end lofts. So they're
Yeah,
using
I'll
the
reword
word,
it.
and
Yep.
now they're now saying, okay, now it's going to be all.
Yeah.
So by incorporating, you're saying it still has to be industrial, but you're incorporating.
Right.
I like that. Kyle, do we still have the mayor's business council?
Yes.
Absolutely.
This might be good, a good section to run by them. A lot of the
Great idea.
members of the council, I believe, are part of this district.
Fully engaged.
Right, and I think that, providing them the draft plan, but specifically calling this out, maybe, doing a presentation at the next meeting potentially, if it falls, or creating one that falls before, we're adopting the plan, I think would be really beneficial to get their feedback.
About how often do they meet regularly?
I think once a quarter.
Okay, so we may luck out. At the very least, we have an email for them, right? Any other thoughts on land use?
Go ahead.
Well, the only thing is looking at the map, you were showing the zoning map, and this may be something that we need to handle internally, but way back when, we thought cars were, needed homes, we decided that all the properties along the alleyways were going to be rezoned parking. Have we retransitioned those to now residential? That's all been taken care of, right?
I believe that was changed in the last plan, yeah.
I thought so too. I just wanted to.
It is, I think you still have zoning for those areas. You still have a P1 district.
But they were future.
Their future land use planned as residential, yes. Like
Okay.
along Woodward especially. They're all showing up as yellow here, but right?
Actually, some
But
of them
at
are
one
showing up as
time,
red.
they had their own
Right.
designation
They-
as,
And they do in zoning,
okay,
just not in future land use anymore.
okay.
Because the previous plan said transition out P1.
Okay. And the properties along 8 Mile, which we have commercial, those are only the existing, what you have colored are existing commercial properties. We don't have existing homes that we're saying, oh, well, we can expand into office.
No, I don't think so.
Okay. I just want to make sure.
But speaking of those Woodward properties,
Alleys?
the properties along Woodward that are zoned commercial office, why are those commercial office rather than mixed use?
The differentiating feature is drive-throughs and intensity of uses. If you look at the zoning plan chart, let me see, wrong mouse.
Oh.
Because we allow,
Mixed use, we could allow drive-throughs?
no,
They're vice versa.
Yeah.
Oh.
As a special land use, they're allowed in the.
So here, if you look at the difference between the teal column and the red column, are the differences between those. And they can be refined. This is,
current? Yeah.
Yeah, it's the issue down by Webster and Spencer that I'm noticing. Yeah, do you see
Oh, it jogs in.
it jogs in and that's all residential. I don't know why it's like that.
it's possible, let us know which,
Oh, so it's
I believe
that
there was-
random red square right there.
okay, that's
Between
just
Webster
a,
and Spencer. Spencer's a dead-end street.
it's just a
and
mistake.
those should be residential.
They might have been rezoned.
Was the auto dealership on it?
Yeah.
It's a White Castle behind the auto dealership here, but then there's still this property. It's still, you see how that's still residential in between there?
Lost.
We'll look at that block.
Did they? I know they did on Silman. See, I know they did it on Silman. I didn't know they did it down there
Oh.
too.
Yeah, I think he's talking about these 3 blocks here.
Talking about, wrong mouse, right here.
Right there.
Yeah.
Because I know
We'll
they did
confirm that
make
boundary.
Notch in on Stillman, but. this
Well, that's
doesn't look
behind, isn't that behind,
right. By like Sam's, Ferndale
Sam's?
Grill.
Yeah, those
Castle,
are
I mean,
houses.
Yeah, it's a mistake. We're gonna fix it. Don't worry.
Got it. Okay, so that's not the auto dealership.
No,
Okay.
No, the dealership's farther north.
no, there was a dealership a little bit farther north, but yeah, that just doesn't look right.
Good eye.
That's selecting sometimes in the GIS layers.
I get it.
And all that kind of
Actually, if you
stuff,
go
Which is why we
onto-
want you to look at it.
Yeah, if you go on to the west side, same block, kind of, you have residential.
I was
right
noticing
there.
that too. I was gonna look at
Yeah,
that.
I was pretty sure that, because that's predominantly Subaru.
Are you sure that's not the cemetery?
Nope.
Cemetery's further north
Oh, I
in
see it.
green.
Okay.
Yeah, we'll check those 2 blocks.
And then, do we want, this little triangle piece is a house currently at Marshall behind the empty insurance company.
On the north or south side of
And
Marshall?
on the south side of Marshall.
On the east,
side of Woodward.
okay.
Oh,
You can see the alley cut in between there, that's a house. I know previously when that building was being looked into, they had it, that was one that was zoned as parking. But it is currently a house and it has a public alley that runs in between it. So I don't know if that needs to be edited as well, if,
We have a priority of not cutting into our neighborhoods and
exactly.
Right.
Yeah.
yellow.
Yeah, I mean, like the alley kind of is like a natural transition between commercial and residential, but then to have that on the other side randomly.
Which one? Sorry, I missed it.
Marshall,
Right here.
where.
There's a
the insurance
tiny
companies
little
in the
like
corner
cut.
and then
Yeah.
This little bitty house. Remember she was talking about how if they made the drive-through, it would be like right next to her living room, whatever. Yeah, right there.
And just to put on the record, the reason for doing this is to protect your neighborhoods from commercial, right?
Yes.
This is your goal. Okay.
Yep.
So I think
And-
there's, sorry, go ahead.
Sorry, and then if you look on Livernois, you'll see that there's 2 commercial sites.
Marshfield?
That's not Marshall, it's.
Marshfield.
Marshfield. I don't know what those are.
Which ones? Marshfield is my street. Maybe
It's just south of Marshfield.
There's all, I'm seeing everything you're.
Oh, the little blue blip
Just a
there?
typo, I think, yeah.
Yeah, yep,
A color
Yeah.
typo.
yeah.
I don't think there's commercial on that street.
No, those are definitely.
There is not.
Building and.
We'll go through and do a field check on all of that, all of those things, to make sure we catch all of them.
So, but speaking, I mean, we do want to protect the neighborhoods from commercial, but we also want to incorporate commercial convenience in
Nodes.
neighborhoods. Sorry?
Nodes, right? Doesn't this talk about nodes?
Yes, but keeping them on at certain locations, right? So like at,
I was actually thinking of a spot that's already commercial, so. But if there are any others within the residential space,
The park? I've got one other.
Oh,
I'm
yeah.
just noticing on Woodward Heights, east of Hilton, I think a couple big chunks of Martin Road Park are marked residential.
That's the school.
school.
Oh, that's the school.
Just like this is the
That's
church.
Jardin. Okay,
Web and the
It's,
church.
yeah, there's 2 schools
got it.
there.
You know what, though, vice versa, you have a lot of
residential.
residential at Wilson Park marked as parked.
And also around the parks,
There and all right there is all residential.
Okay.
And the Taft Park too, right?
Harding, yep.
I will personally
Harding
go
Taft,
through.
yep.
Go through, okay.
Something happened, and I need to go through it and do a different, I will quality control all of this.
so the urban residential versus the traditional. I think that it makes sense, you know, around the downtown and Woodward Heights. I suppose it makes sense along 10 Mile as well, but I guess I just wanted to bring that up if there's any discussion
I didn't,
in the location of urban residential and the difference between traditional.
the east of Hilton along 10 Mile, I didn't entirely understand it. That's basically a dead end corner right here.
Right.
I
Where are
think
you at?
this is a holdover from your previous plan.
Right.
It is, and it's one of the reasons that we upzoned on, not on Mahan, McDowell.
Which I think is left over a little, I'm noticing a little square. Those two.
Oh, that's a square from our conversation at dinner. So it's
Yes.
like we upzoned that, yes,
Yes.
that's right.
Um,
Aye.
where is it?
So the biggest difference on the housing front, let me go back.
Yeah, we can go into the housing if you,
Front,
And
the
come back.
difference between traditional and urban. So we went back and forth and around and through on a lot of different, I mean, this just carries our conversation from like 3 years ago now, pre-pandemic, of what we were going to do with your housing districts and trying to understand the intent of how things happened over time and all the different districts that there are. And so, and reading between the lines on some of the intent from the last plan, and trying to interpret that for guidance in the future. And I think the biggest thing is when we were looking at your zoning, just for a moment, our two, see, but the difference between R1 and R2 was slight, but enough that the that was R2 was kind of used as a, for lack of a better word, transit-oriented development clusters kind of along Woodward. And so at one point we were like, well, maybe we should just continue to treat those differently than other parts that are zoned R1 and going back and forth. But the purpose of this map shows you where all of the existing attached units already are. And you can see why in the past, for instance, this cluster down here, right at 8 Mile and Woodward, was rezoned to R2. Generally, R3 follows the orange areas, and R4 is included into the orange areas, but those are really just the Housing Commission buildings. So at the end of the day, with the steering committee, what we talked about was an equitable approach. So rather than saying R2 is really that different than R1, we're saying they all should be treated equally, that the distinguishing factor between traditional and urban is being within walking distance of downtown, basically, that circle around downtown, and these kind of transitioning corridors up here. That the rest of the area, while there are differences, they're not different enough to not take the words of the Community Affordability and Inclusive Housing Action Plan, the KHAP, I'm just going to call it, the long titled plan, into consideration and treat most of the city similarly, and allowing 1 unit, allowing 2 unit, and allowing 3 unit by right. So what that could look like, if this is the way that you and the community decide to go, could be duplexes, like you already have a lot of existing 2 unit next to single family. It could be a 2 unit with an accessory dwelling unit in the back. That is the most likely 3 unit possibility that would be permitted in this traditional residential area. The compromise was to allow 4 or more units by right. Again, this is future land use, but setting you up for future zoning, because we needed a lot more direction on this in the plan that was in your previous plan. So this is the time to kind of hash out if this is the right policy move. And so it's a little more technical than we usually get, but it's because you really want this direction from the KHAP. So the urban residential areas would allow 4 more units by right, but they would be special land uses in the traditional residential, and we would propose writing standards, whether it's along a major corridor or it's a certain lot size, certain character standards, the units don't get too big and imposing on the neighbors, that sort of thing. So we just put it under there, it was in certain circumstances with extra approval to be defined when you update your zoning ordinance. But from a policy standpoint, this is a shift, but we think that it's supported by your KHAP and is an equitable approach that doesn't try and pick and choose which neighborhoods, because that was one approach we had a while ago. So we're trying to say equitably, let's try and allow for those basically citywide. So it'd be allowing 3 units citywide. And it's a leap, but I think what we discussed with the steering committee is it's not that unreasonable impact-wise, as long as you have some design standards that keep the neighborhood being.
It's actually very interesting, because I brought that up a while back, saying, why don't we allow 2-unit homes across the whole city? Is there any place in the city that we wouldn't want a 2-family home? And so I think it's
So
great.
we took it one step further.
Yeah, you went
and
through,
said,
three,
well, let's talk 3.
yeah. Yeah. But I do think that, height has an issue, because
bulk
in
and
the
massing.
northwest corner, where they're mostly bungalows, I wouldn't want a 30-story, building
Right.
next to, a 15-story,
Right.
bungalow between. But, yeah. I like the idea.
But through the chair, in R1, you could still currently add a second story to your bungalow.
Well, you're talking second story, I'm talking
Right. So you could,
units, living
I know,
units.
but, I don't think it's that uncommon unless you're like in the Dales.
Oh, yeah.
To have like all your houses, because I was saying. The places where I do this like forward and backward dance on this, and particularly like the little area, east of Hilton in the northeast corner along 10 Mile, for example. We designate that as, a space where you can do 4 units by right, which is what this is suggesting.
Along 10 Mile here?
Yeah. Then what's the price threshold at which the small, affordable rental house on a slab becomes a combined lot and a 4-plex? And is that good or bad or indifferent? What's the outcome we hope to achieve, and what do we see the market pushing around us? So how do I get maybe a slightly larger in mass or bulk duplex instead of a Bigfoot house, right? Like what's the, if I have to change, let's say we allow more lot coverage, and that's not how we think about it anymore, but we allow more lot coverage if you have a duplex than we would if you just had a single family, then maybe it helps push back against like the Berkeley and Birmingham Bigfoots. Like those are and that's all
Good.
zoning stuff.
Yeah.
But like when I think about 2 units, no question for me. Like absolutely, I don't know why we ever did it that way, and I've wanted to undo it for like a decade. So duplexes.
2 units right, so it's
Duplexes are dramatically undercounted already in this map. There's 3 just on my little block, so legal ones. So the 3 and 4 is where I would think we need to be very thoughtful about making sure that they still fit neighborhood scale and character, particularly if we're now beginning to get to housing prices that are going to start becoming tear downs and rebuilds. So are we, again, artificially pushing development, and are we okay in the direction we're pushing it? I don't want to suggest that it's bad. I think we just have to be really
Yeah, are we encouraging,
Lot
what's the
assembly.
reverse of affordability?
gentrification,
Pardon?
communication.
gentrification,
Gentrification.
displacement.
Yeah.
And I don't think it's bad to add to our housing stock. Adding 4 units where you'd once had 1 is
Yeah.
like that, I think, is an overall
But are those 4
positive.
units going to be more expensive than the 1 unit that you're replacing?
And
Probably.
in that question, we have to acknowledge that Ferndale does not exist in a vacuum. right? So like, I think that's where I struggle, is that, am I talking about a regional housing market? Am I talking about a Ferndale housing market? Like, when I think about adding to the overall, the alleviation of the nationwide housing crunch, right? Like, Ferndale's not gonna solve that. Ferndale's not ever gonna be exactly the place everyone can be right now because they wanna be here right now. But what's the right next step? And what are the potential negatives and potential positives of that? I'd love to hash it out in zoning, frankly, but I also want to make sure we get to that point. I don't want to have a heart attack. So I like 3, particularly if it's a duplex with an accessory unit. We've got several of them being built in the neighborhood I work in Detroit right now. They look fantastic. It's a stacked, like, imagine the stacked units at 9 in Livernois having a garage and an ADU behind them. That's what's coming as rentals in our neighborhood in Detroit.
Kind of a low-hanging fruit option.
Well, it's one of those things too. I mean, a lot of us have old garages. I mean, my garage, I know one day will fall down. And if I have to rebuild, I'd rather rebuild it with a rental unit
Yeah.
and then now help pay off the garage, you know? So that's kind of my thought about having the accessory dwelling units is like, okay, you won't have to rebuild eventually. So then you then add into the housing stock.
They're already permitted, though, or are they special land uses?
No, the special land, it's
Right, no,
not permitted,
also
but it would be
okay.
under this.
It would be under this.
It'd be by right under this.
Yeah.
Yes,
Well, it would be future land use planned for that and recommended that you change your zoning to allow them by right.
that's important distinction.
With standards, I think that's the thing that gets lost sometimes in this, and that's where we want to definitely shape the conversation a bit when the plan goes out for public review, is that none of this is just 3 units by, it's 3 units, but with character. So if you'll notice, and this is where we've tried to define it a bit. This is,
Kathleen, just real
Yeah.
quick before you, I think you're gonna jump to character and design, or?
I was just gonna find I actually have a slide on it. I was just gonna jump to, we want to ask the public, what do you mean by that?
Yeah, well, so just real quick, because I wanted to tie our previous conversation about the increase in, potential increase in population and just what that looks like. And I know a lot of families that move out of Ferndale because they have a house that doesn't fit what they want to have in
Right.
terms of the size house to have kids.
Like a 4-bedroom with 3 bathrooms and, yeah.
And we would love to see that the homes are improved so that rather than leaving, that you could just build on and whatnot. But because the prices, especially right now, are so
Right.
obstructive to doing that, if you were also able to add on a unit, it can, so what Commissioner Hackforth was saying is, well, if I can rent out as I'm renovating my garage, that might make, that work. And so I think this is really important to maintaining the existing population and growing it, as we're talking about.
It also helps too for retaining the elderly population because it may provide the opportunity where if you have someone who maybe can't take care of their own house by themselves, but then have an accessory dwelling unit
Yep.
that can work together in tandem to have them live, then it retains that population too.
Maintain that we don't need more 4-bedroom houses in Ferndale, we just need somewhere for grandma and grandpa to move safely,
Yeah.
Or us, I mean, we could
personally.
have our home and then have an accessory building in the back, and as we get older, we move into the accessory building and we rent out the house in front.
Yep, lots of alternatives and choices that we aren't used to yet, that I think being open to the creativity. So yes, Ferndale doesn't need to solve the housing crisis, but I can say your hopes to be innovative and forward-thinking is a lot of people look to you to lead the way, so no pressure. But it's kind of exciting to talk about this in a community that is open to this because you will set the standard for your neighbors because you are already that way. Just saying.
Think about 3 and 4.
I think that, so I'd like to see the public's response to it,
Yeah.
because I am interested to see, I think we could, I think that we have had people that are open to, and we've seen already, special land use or rezoning requests of increasing the number of units on single-family properties, or historically single-family. And I think we've got kind of mixed responses. I think we've had a lot of negative responses, but also some that are, you know, maybe hopeful or like wanting to see improvements in their neighborhood, but want to see it a specific way. So I think this will be a really great opportunity for us to put this out and hopefully get a response from the public of what they want to see, because it is a pretty big difference. But I think it makes a lot of sense in terms of policy and just the historical nature of our community as well, just to allow that flexibility.
We're going to need your help on that front. So I would, we're working with Studio Incognita on language and messaging around all of this, because it's very nuanced, and like I said, it can get misinterpreted instantly. And so I know many of you are not on social media. I'm not really either. But that's where a lot of the discussion is happening. And so we have a plan. That's what this slide was getting at. Studio Incognita in your communications department, to be very strategic about this. But we would welcome your suggestions on, I think the plan is to not arm, that's too strong of a word, to provide talking points. And if you can think of things that you've heard people say that we can work on, like maybe some FAQ around this, that you as residents, you as planning commissioners, as advocates, but also representatives of the community, so that as you're talking to your neighbors, your friends on social media or responding, because I fear it could become, maybe I'm just anticipating what could be the worst, but it can be a message that gets co-opted and has inadvertent responses. And so I would welcome any thoughts from you all on how to be open, like the chair suggested, but also helping make sure that we're getting the intent across as well.
Remind people what's already here. I think that's going to be the
That's why we have
most
a map,
important.
yeah.
Not just the dots. Like, don't just show me white boxes. Show me the
Photos.
Show me the four squares on Camborne. Show me the duplexes on Webster. Show me the new construction fourplex at 9 in Livernois, right? Like, what did it look like? How have we learned from what has worked here for a long time, right? So this is the historic fabric of the community. This is how it gets interpreted in 21st century construction, right? Like no one's ever going to rebuild that fourplex on Camborne. Not ever going to. But they're here, they work, they're part of the fabric of our community. You probably don't even notice it anymore because you walk by it every time and you have for your whole.
Unless you notice the 2 mailboxes or
Yeah.
whatever.
You know, it's a good point that maybe
Just
the
white boxes.
examples are current examples versus.
Yeah. I mean, there's even somehow, I mean, the house right across the street from me only has one door, one light. It looks like a traditional, bungalow, and it's actually an upper and downer. So,
I've lived in those.
Well,
The
I-
houses on my street are duplexes.
yeah.
I have a lot of those pictures because every time I drive through Ferndale, I go and take pictures of them. I would love it if you would send us examples while you're out taking a walk.
Sure.
Okay.
Yeah.
Can we do that? Can we have you send them to Christine to compile for us? Does that work? Because like I said, I have my stockpile, but I want to make sure the ones that or I would also, if you want to invite me for a walk in your neighborhood, I'll take you up on that, because it's to see what, I'm used to the few places that I go and.
I mean, I live down Wordsworth. We're about 50-50 split
Wordsworth?
on multi-units. And I only know that because when I was positioning for the speed humps, I realized how many of our houses are rentals and how many are homes.
Okay.
Because we have a lot of duplexes.
Are you between Woodward and Hilton?
Yep.
That's the east side.
Yep. East side between Woodward and Hilton. Yep.
A Taco Bell?
Yep, but down the street from Taco Bell, it's alright. I always tell people that when they're like, where do you live? I'm like, you know where Taco Bell is, the one in Woodward?
I could not live down the street from Taco Bell.
I haven't stepped
Smell would
foot
just
in years.
permeate, wouldn't it? We're also planning on releasing the goals. And so Studio Incognita is also helping us wordsmith these again, so I will send along the comments that you had on these, but the idea is to kind of release the overarching plan topics as
I
well.
like the white boxy stuff, but I just really think we've got great examples.
No, we do, we absolutely do, and we,
People are used to
yep.
seeing, and it makes sense in context.
would it make sense to do, since there are two different options, to have one current and then also this is what, because people know
This
that
also isn't the
the
example.
past is not the future too, so maybe we could do like, this is a current example, this is what we expect to see with the new construction. You only have to change one of the images, Kathy.
This is a sample, so
Okay.
literally Studio Incognita is taking some of what we sent them and repackaging it all, so I'll just package up some photos and.
There's one other, if we're still talking about future.
So in regards to social media, and I get that nowadays that's really the way to communicate or share information, but we're not solely going to rely on responses from social media.
No,
Okay. Because all you'll get is keyboard warriors,
Right,
typing
no.
away whatever they want, and it'll usually be the same 12 people complaining about everything.
right?
Okay. There's going to be open houses.
We did a public engagement period already where so that was one of the first slides that Kathleen showed, is that we used a variety of different methods. And so we had those three, if you remember, in the fall of like
Community Summit is what we
community
call it.
summits. So we had those, we
We got
had
the names
online
and addresses of
engagement.
those people that participated.
Yes, we've been keeping documentation of that. There's like an online posting board. There was in the hallway here, like a actual posting board.
Yep,
And
remember
so,
all that.
and then we have the steering committee and all of that, and then also we'll have the public period where that's just open. So I don't think we have any actual public engagement planned for that period, except keeping the posting up online where you can post your comments.
Is it not something to consider inviting the people that came to those summits back to say, we heard you and the committee worked and this is what we came up with, to get their thoughts,
Like to launch the public input period?
as opposed to just hoping that they'll respond to an internet communication that says, give us your feedback?
That's a good point. Kyle, so we have the email list, and so can we just verify that we'll be sending that list of addresses that we've collected, information about all of our public hearings, so we're gonna have one
Planning
public.
Commission has a public hearing and, yeah, we didn't plan for any more, again, COVID. We want to be careful on the in-person stuff, but I might suggest some opportunities that a combined, like, staff planning commission, like, answer your question, kind of, like, you could have an informal Q&A before your public hearing, you could have it at, next month's meeting, you could schedule another meeting like this that's specifically advertised, it's become a capacity issue.
I just think that, they invested their time to come and
Right.
give us their thoughts.
I think for
that
sure.
we could invite them to say, here's the website, please take time to look what we presented. There's also the opportunity to come and talk to the planning commission when we review it, or, and just give them those
A
dates.
personal invite, yep.
Exactly,
Yep.
exactly. Then they
Yeah,
have
we
the
have
option to choose what, and how they want to engage back.
Right. Yeah, we have the email list because it was all via,
Web X.
it was an internet thing. Not one of the Zooms. It was a RSVP software that I can't think of right now. But we have it all.
Excellent.
Meet something, I don't know. Again, I wasn't in charge of it, so I don't remember what it's called.
Okay,
Great
thank you.
point.
That's awesome.
Through the chair, I've got one other process question about meetings that are coming up. Is the steering committee done now, or are they gonna come and, speak at planning commission and introduce themselves and say they're on the steering committee? Or is there are they on board with this? Do we, okay, good.
Yeah, so I think,
Oh my gosh, yes.
yeah,
Okay.
so they've
Had 2 or 3 meetings in the last few months on this.
Okay,
They
okay.
have, those that couldn't attend have provided comments
Great,
multiple
okay.
times. We can send
We have
a
other people in the
specific
community
email
that
to them.
have the deep background on it.
And we're going to hopefully use them to help equip them with the same kind of talking points that we hope to equip you with.
And so they've actually already edited the document that we've seen today. So Kathleen provided this initial draft to the steering committee, then the steering committee met, provided suggestions, ton of edits, and then Kathleen edited that before it came to us. So we've actually already incorporated a ton
And gotten
of
more
it.
comments from them in the last week that aren't reflected in the draft that you have. So we have a list of revisions, including what you've described today.
And then as a steering committee liaison, I can also provide a more thorough update if you would like, or, yeah,
Make
however
sure
we'd
that,
like to.
you know, when we think about communication, it's not just coming from the city, it's also coming from your neighbors who put their like, time
Which
and
is,
sweat
yep.
and energy into it, you know?
Which is
so-
why we've talked to them about, and they specifically said, yes, we would like to venture onto some of the Facebook groups and neighborhood groups and talk to their neighbors about it. They just
Okay.
want some talking points.
Got it.
So we're
Okay.
working on talking points. Yeah.
That's exciting.
So real quickly, the climate action is its own self-contained little chapter, but it's also, you'll notice, sprinkled throughout the rest of the plan, yeah.
Sorry, one more map that we wanted to go through.
In the future land use, there's a map that's called Redevelopment Strategies, and it's on a page that's tagged as 102 and 116. It's green, it's all kinds of greens. Greens and teals and turquoises.
And I think it comes from the previous master plan.
No,
as
this is
well.
a new plan.
Oh, okay.
This is a new plan.
And yeah, so the verbiage in sustain, nurture, and catalyze, I just wanted to make sure that we weren't setting ourselves up for confusion in interpretation when we talk about sustain for the vast majority of the city, but we're also talking about a residential density change for the vast majority of the city.
It's kind of stagnant. I don't want to say well,
Yeah, sustain makes me think like,
No change.
it literally says maintain the existing development, the existing pattern.
and there, yeah.
I just feel like we've got,
We like sustain better than preserve. It was,
I like sustain better than preserve, but
is,
it suggests preserve.
Meaning that we want to encourage more duplexes, triplexes. Is that what you're saying, Kate?
I think we
she
just
doesn't
have
want
a
it to
whole-
preclude that because it's too strong on don't change.
Had a whole conversation about why it aligns with the goals that were laid out earlier to have a conversation,
So this,
incremental change.
Right.
And yet this says sustain and maintain existing pattern.
this is where we thought, we tried other verbiage that was more like, how much are we actually, like, the level of change? Like, change is continuous, change is everywhere. But this was an attempt to say, but it's more is gonna change along the corridors. More is gonna change in the industrial areas. Those are likely to redevelop more. And so it's not to say that they aren't going to change. So if it's reading that way, we wanna tweak it. But the idea was to say, it's generally built out, you're not gonna see the pattern, the character, the intensity change as much as you will along the corridors. For that reason, because we were hearing, don't build tall buildings in my neighborhood.
Yep.
Was allowed,
Yep.
right? And like, well, the compromise is put it on the corridors. So I don't have an immediate, if someone has a suggestion on how to tweak that.
I was just going to say that it's very, I mean, so there is an existing pattern. And so as we talked about, when we're talking about increasing the unit size, we don't want to change the character of the development. We just want to increase the units.
Right.
Some of the footprint.
I don't
but-
want to suddenly have 150-foot lots, I still want.
Right. So it is
Right.
consistent with the pattern of the existing development, though it might be an increase in density. And like, as we said, it is consistent with, there are already duplexes, quads, there is that. So maybe that's what we mean.
I see a nuanced understanding, can see these two things existing together. I just don't want to set us up for an argument over the interpretation of a future land use plan when someone wants to do a big lot combination. R1 and now
I mean,
this whole page seemed to not match the rest.
my thought is that nurture is closer to what we want for sustain, and
Okay.
maybe we need something else in the middle between nurture and catalyze. I don't know if that makes sense, but
Yeah.
Does it make, well,
I think it needs to evolve, not sustain, but that might be scary.
And through the chair, if you are going to keep this graphic, can you move the Woodward Avenue logo and tell me what's going on with the commercial on that part of Woodward?
It's just the same, that's.
Okay, well, because right now I'm looking at it and it doesn't, I can't tell if it's sustained, nurture, catalyze. All I know is there's a lot of empty buildings in my neighborhood right now, and I want them to be something else. So right now I'm looking at this and saying, okay, great, we're still forgotten.
We'll put it on, I mean, it's the idea of, catalyzing along the corridor with that blue, right? But the idea is that the development, mostly along 8 Mile this is all new because we were trying to reframe your redevelopment. So this was all with Jordan before he left on saying, where are we gonna see the most change? 8 Mile, Woodward, and 9 Mile. And then the areas in the industrial that are likely gonna change the most. Then secondarily, those kind of medium green areas. And then what's gonna probably change the least is the lime. And this was to not say that those areas aren't gonna change, but the pattern, the character, the feel, the intensity is going to be less than those other areas. And I understand how that makes it seem like it's not going to change at all and could be used to mean that. It was really to say you could change the intensity everywhere and make it all your residential neighborhoods super dense. But the idea was this was the compromise that the intensity was going to, and we tried not to use that word because again, density and intensity can be misinterpreted, but the idea was the greater change is going to happen along those catalyzed areas. And so it is a fine line of both saying we want to protect your neighborhoods, but there's going to be change, but we don't anticipate there being a ton of change. Because the reality is, it is going to take a lot for someone to buy a single family house, tear it down and build a duplex. Like that is, the market has to be exactly right for that to happen. So yeah, we can look at changing the name or the description.
well, so also it's related to section D, the corridors, and so there is the whole section that defines that as well, so maybe it can just be further,
But then there's also the conversation about a sort of unequal income and housing value in different areas of the city. So if we're going to talk about which areas are going to change the most, I think we should be honest and say if you live in a neighborhood that has a lower housing value, you may see more change because it's going to make more economic sense for someone to redevelop. That's just really honest.
And I guess the resulting policy conversation would be, should there be more in place to preserve that affordability? And that's where our tools are limited.
Yep, agreed.
Ultimately, we're in a capitalist society.
Well, we're in the state of Michigan.
And Michigan. So like our ability to protect affordable, maybe lower value neighborhoods is very, very limited. And so we're trying to be realistic here. And again, balancing all those priorities, right? You have a lot of very strong priorities. Some neighborhoods, certain things are probably going to be more realistically weighted heavier than in other neighborhoods. And it's really hard to make this the same everywhere. And so,
Because it's not the same everywhere.
no, but we're trying to be inclusive in that we're not trying to acknowledge the less valued parts of the neighborhoods that are lower value neighborhoods, saying that you're less valuable, right? Could be a judgment of that if it were mapped that way, right? Be like, watch out, or it could be a signal to investors to start
They got their own tools.
picking up the smaller, I mean, that's just what they're doing
They've already
everywhere.
done it.
Yeah, and, yeah.
Like a third of our housing stock is rental.
Right. And we got a question from Heather, the Housing Commission, about like, what is the ideal mix of rental and owner? And there really isn't one, and we can't define that, nor frankly control it. I think from the Housing Commission side, they can have certain abilities to use, HUD funding for certain things, but we can't really regulate that. And so, And nor is there an ideal mix, because just because it's renter doesn't mean that it could mean that it's more valuable, it could mean that it's less desirable, it could mean that it's more desirable. Like, the whole spectrum exists there for all of these housing types and corridors and everything. And so trying to treat things as equitably as we can, but you're being realistic. And so I don't have the answer right now on how to tweak this, but would welcome more.
It's just one page that it just jumped out to me as like, I couldn't make it fit. All the rest of the pieces of the story fit together, and this one didn't fit.
So,
You were looking for a better word for nurture? How about foster?
I like it.
I just got it.
Another, and this might not answer, but what if we didn't highlight what we have under sustain now?
Left it blank.
Yeah, and
I had it that way first.
the catalyst, and leave off the sustain part.
We had it that way to begin with, and then we felt like we needed to show. So we could.
Doesn't that mean that then we're not even talking about redeveloping those sites at all? I mean, because I actually think that sustaining, and maybe the wording could be, maybe sustain isn't the right word, maybe it can be improved, but to me, it means we're sustaining the character, but we're redeveloping at the same time. This is a redevelopment map. The strategy is to sustain the character, but.
So that might be more refined.
Fine.
And if you read the text in the upper right left, I think that's the intent of this page, is the idea that you're going to see the greatest degree of change along the corridors and in industrial areas. It never says this does not mean that the neighborhoods are not going to change. It's just it's the greatest degree, and that the corridors are prioritized for the biggest degree of change.
That part, we certainly have seen that.
And to use city-owned sites, right, to meet some of the city's, the easiest way for the city to meet affordability goals is to prioritize affordability on city-owned sites. That's.
Well, it's interesting because I would actually say the northeast corner should have a C because we're looking at redeveloping the Como's lot and the, I don't even know what we call it, the Breckenridge lot?
Yeah, I think it shows up on this site, it became a scalar issue, like we were already blocking a lot of the text, like,
Yeah, that's fine.
right? Yeah, we can add that little, but yeah,
You'll
it's
get the
covered down
people
here.
along Withington freaking out when they see that C.
Yeah, it's been called out for a long time that the Withington
Oh, yeah.
has potential.
Yeah, but after the 360 debacle, everyone's fearful.
So what I'm gonna say is, if you could pay particular attention, if you have it in you to provide us with some wordsmithing suggestions, we would appreciate them on this. I think I'm sensing the general consensus from you all, and we can take a stab at tweaking that language. But paying attention to this section, again, since it was Jordan too that helped us write it, right? So we can talk with Roger now too, and dig in more with Kyle on how some of this is phrased to see if it doesn't, we sell that more.
That's right. Blame the last guy that left.
Yep. Well, no, luckily, I rushed the place section and the land use section. And I said, please, Jordan, before you leave, let's get everything out of your brain. And he graciously did that before he left. But it's appropriate to revisit it with the new staff to make sure that it still makes
Absolutely.
sense.
Absolutely.
Okay, oops, I wanted to, wrong keyboard, dueling monitors. Okay. So we added some bits and pieces to implementation as well. Again, because your previous plan had an action plan, but didn't really have an implementation strategy of like how to actually do things. So read this section, see if this section makes sense. I'm gonna highlight a few of the places, because we definitely heard throughout from the steering committee and from the public that they don't understand how decisions are made. So we added several pieces in here to try and underscore what your role is as a planning commission, what council's role is, what the public's role is, how a master plan is a cyclical process, how planning decisions evolve over time, how zoning can change, right? Like, just because zoning is the law of what you can do right now doesn't mean that it can't be changed and amended. So we tried to work some of that narrative into here. In this process diagram, this is a new component for you. First time we've ever written this in a plan, a decision-making checklist. So take a look at this. The intent of this section, again, is to not provide a hard and fast scorecard or anything that's used, but to try to instill some transparency in the process for you as decision makers when something potentially controversial comes forward, or you're trying to figure out what to do with city sites, right? Or in addition, almost used in a kind of ad hoc way, like you would use your special land use standards, or your, like, as are we checking this box? Because if you recall some of the graphics that we had from our September meeting of like weighing all these priorities, or I've alluded to it here today, that you have a lot of very strong priorities. Not every project can meet every single one of these. And so demonstrating those trade-offs, I think, is key. And when you are making a decision or approving something, either as council or as planning commission or city staff, they can, not that this provides you with defense, but this provides you with a way of communicating why you made those decisions, that the public would appreciate a better understanding of the why. So our vast public that's not here today, I hope that part of a lot of what came out of the process was this disconnect of not understanding how city government works, being distrustful. And so we're trying to equip you with some tools to help hold everyone accountable, so that the public could use this as a decision-making checklist. That this could evolve into a scorecard in the future. There are lots of different examples of how communities have used things like these to kind of give you, to show that we're trying to benefit the community. We're trying to give evaluation criteria related to our values, to our guiding principles, but so that we are making our decision upon a sound foundation that's not arbitrary. So we're very excited by this piece, and it took us a while to get here, but we're hopeful that this can be the start of you using it. I don't think it's going to be a finished product at this point until you start using it and seeing how it works. But any questions on that piece or anything new that's in the implementation chapter?
No, but are we going in order? Because I feel like we missed the climate one.
I glossed over it.
Okay.
For time.
Where was I? Or
I
you
said
just
it, and then someone's like, can we keep talking about housing?
Oh,
That was my
okay,
fault.
I'm sorry.
That was me.
Climate is self-contained. You have a whole like metric tracking portal through ICLEI, which is an awesome tool. So all of the modeling and stuff is in there. So this all comes basically from that.
Okay, what I was really surprised is that there's nothing in here about stormwater management for individuals, like houses, like, rain barrels.
In the systems section.
In the systems section?
Yep, underwater. Remember we were talking about water management.
Yeah, but I was under okay.
There's a
I
whole
was under
diagram with showing how to reuse water and rainwater and rain barrels.
Okay. I'm just surprised that because I was under the impression that the water management was really the water system. And
It is, and part of that is how residents
I would have
contribute.
expected this in the climate since it affects the climate.
I would argue it's more of a sustainability measure than climate, like water's direct impact on climate. The climate chapter is really about carbon, and water's has an impact on carbon, but the focus of the decarbonization is mostly related to carbon intensity through vehicles and the built environment and things like that. So where is the...
Okay, there's your air. You have a whole
Right.
section on air.
Right. Again, anytime you're organizing a plan, and again, you can artificially silo things. It's
Yeah.
really hard. We're trying to group things by like topic. But, so that's why we tee up energy under systems. There's not a ton that the city can do on energy other than their personal, fleet, city buildings. But the city can work with other cities to put pressure on utilities, right? So setting up the stage for energy and systems, for water, talking about stormwater and consumption and the whole water system and all these beautiful diagrams. Where's the one on the house? Right there, boom. Here we go, how to be more effective with gray water reuse. All in this section, and then when you get to climate, it's really more specific to meeting those carbon goals. So it's woven throughout, and then boom, decarbonization at the end.
Did we talk about EV charging in the energy section?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, thanks. Or
I think so. I think so. I don't want to say that now.
I can find it as well.
I think it is. The thing is, you already require it in your
Right.
Yep, got that.
When we were talking about industrial, I was just thinking about all the new facilities that are being built for electrification of, that probably wasn't the right word, but electric vehicles and whatnot, so.
I'm realizing we don't have a what we've done recently thing under some of the systems chapters that might, because we had the recently adopted EV charging.
That's okay, I'm sure it's in there, so.
No, I'm gonna make sure it is. I know I'm pretty sure there's an action, and I think it might be in the climate. Again, things have moved too, so my,
Are you saying you don't know the page number of every item?
for a while, we didn't even have the page numbers aligned, so it was just each chapter was 1 through 20, 1 through 50. And here's electric vehicles. Yeah, EV information campaign, fleet. Here's the let's talk to you. Because someone on ESC was saying that DTE will even pay for you to get a charger in your garage. I don't know if that program still exists or it used to.
I can speak from experience. If we just put one in, it does not exist anymore.
Okay,
You can still
darn.
get some kind of a small rebate, but they're not paying you.
They're not paying for them. They used to.
No, that's about $1,000 or so to get it done.
You can get a rebate for giving them your refrigerator.
Yep.
Any other questions on climate action? It's some ambitious goals, not gonna lie. We have a lot of work to do. It's definitely whipped me into shape in the last year after working on both yours and Royal Oak's climate action plans. I'm oh my God. Which is why I wanted to ride my bike today, but then alas, it rained and I had overlapping meetings, but, okay. So the other big section, which I'm hoping to maybe solicit a volunteer to Kate to help wordsmith some of the actions.
Did I get voluntold?
No, nope. It sounded, so this is currently still in Excel and not fully formatted because we know that this is gonna change a lot, these actions. We want to get these right, and city staff is busy. And I'm hopeful some of you might be able to look at a section or think about your history in the past. It doesn't have to be the whole thing. If there's a section or two of the action plan, we would love some editing help on this, both in terms of the wording of the action, the time frame or priority, and then key partners we should be dealing with. I did my best to put in some key departments at the city, so the action plan is organized by each chunk of the chapters. What's missing? What's confusing? We took a lot of your existing actions. We had a whole spreadsheet. It's just the spreadsheet is complicated, and I tried to make it as simple as I could. Justin commented on his annual action report last year when we started all of this. So his 2021 report to council or whatever that said how progress is going. So we started with that. We did an evaluation with the steering committee where they basically went through each, like, keep, retain, revise. We've tried making those revisions. Steering committee has provided revisions. The mayor, as part of the steering committee, went through and tweaked wordsmith things. Staff has been helping us, city managers, but like, it is, I don't want to say that the action plan is the most important part of the plan, but it's what you're going to use at least annually to set priorities. And so we want to make sure things are in there and referenced appropriately. So with that, if you filled out your little handy sheet and maybe said, what's missing from the action plan? Or if anyone is into the, like, I don't care as much about the vision-y kind of policy stuff, I'm much more interested in the how we're gonna get it done, I would solicit volunteers to help us wordsmith this in the next week or so. Anyone?
I already printed it and wrote all over it, so.
It's okay, yeah.
Am I allowed to add things, though?
Yes,
I've got
absolutely.
2 things.
Let's talk about the things, if it's that few of things, let's talk about the things you want to add.
And they're both related to the schools, which means they're hard.
Yes, they are.
So, but I think they're controllable because we're not telling schools what to do. First is that I think we need to coordinate traffic, and it's alluded to in here a little bit with safe routes to school, but not quite. Coordinate traffic calming, streetscape redesigns, any sort of public infrastructure improvements with the school district to make sure that we're matching their updated uses on school buildings. So we are re-jigsawing who goes to school where with the construction of our new elementary school.
Right.
And knowing that now what was
Traffic
kindergarten
patterns.
through 2nd grade building is now going to be a half-day high school building for high school commuters means that there's going to need to be changes to things not just on the school property at Roosevelt, they're going to need to be changed on Drayton too, right? So we don't need bus drop-offs, so we might need more parking. Like that's what I'm thinking, right? So make sure we know what the school district is planning in terms of, within the next 10 years, future uses of their buildings. They just laid it all out for the bond. And then make sure we're coordinating our public infrastructure improvements with that. So simple, that one seems easy peasy, but could sneak up on us if they're like, oh, didn't we tell you?
Right, that's a good point.
All the school buses are going over there now. The other one about the schools is, I think, because this turned into a real case of hot potato with Taft and Wilson. The big picture, we need to find a way to coordinate, whether it's a charrette or an RFP process or even just a discussion to start with the school district for any upcoming school site reuses. Right now, they hold that like this. They're like, if we're going to sell a building, we're going to sell a building and no one else can talk to us about it, and legally they can do that. But if we can start now trying to have a conversation and make sure we've still got those connections so that hopefully we don't have what happened last time, which was completely independently issued and evaluated RFPs for major land use changes in our community that landed in our desk and said, make it residential. We want residential. Like it was.
I will say we had a call with the facilities folks at the school and it was very productive.
Yes, yep.
It was great. So I know that you sit on the
Bond committee.
thank you, that facilitated that call.
All
So
the
the
other
seed,
things they'll let me sit on.
the seed was planted, but again, that was with Jordan. So I think it would be good to circle the wagons
I
again with
can add that to my list of things to talk
Joe
about.
and Roger to make those connections again, and Kyle potentially.
Right now, there are not school closings planned, but like if we could.
But an
just come to
ongoing
some sort of agreement that like if they're going to
discussion,
dispose
yeah.
of property, if they're going to close a school, they need to acknowledge that they exist within a community that has existing land use patterns that should at least be a part of the conversation. Because last time, like, residents weren't even part of the conversation. That's a really hard one, and if you don't want me to put it in, I understand.
It's hard because
Can't
we
control
can't
it.
actually control schools in Michigan, but that doesn't mean that you can't, you can put an action in there to, facilitate ongoing conversations and keep open lines of communication with the school district. Like, it can be that
Okay,
non-committal frankly, to remind you to look at it without forcing them to do anything,
Okay.
if the rest of you are okay with those suggestions.
I just get mad at them when I work real hard for them, and then they're like, "What? We didn't need to ask you."
So I don't have one specific addition, but in the whole climate action plan section, 6.1 through, I always believe in leading by example, and so I think there needs to be things in here that specifically the city needs to do in addition. I mean, we're requesting, or we're encouraging increased green purchased energy for residential. Well, the city should be pursuing that as well. We can't really ask the residents to do it if the city's not doing it.
Good point.
You want to get a drink and do this together? You like spreadsheets?
I like drinks.
Do you, I can give you an Excel, man.
What?
I can give you an Excel spreadsheet. I'll meet you on a patio somewhere to work on this.
Love it.
Let's do it.
Subcommittee on finalizing the action plan.
Yeah, I can do that this week. Or
That would be great. Not to take things outside of the process, I'm not suggesting that, but to workshop this with a sub-task force
I'd be
sometime,
happy to, yeah.
just to make sure.
Talking about consolidating like things, looking for typos, and adding things that are being discussed at the table tonight.
Right.
So I don't think we're taking something.
No,
out of the
no,
process.
no,
I think
just
we're
workshopping
acknowledging
it.
that we're
Yeah, now we're not creating brand
half a
new
dozen key city
items.
staff members down.
Right.
Like, we need to get it done.
Just to workshop it more. That'd be great. Because we want this to be useful, right? So I have made action plans that are super simple and super complicated. So the question, and this came down when we were talking to staff about the metrics, especially the outcomes of the plan. You'll notice we kept the outcomes high level, increase, decrease, other than climate action where we set actual targets because of the staff capacity to track metrics. It doesn't preclude the city, like I know the city manager has like a portal of tracking all the things in the council strategic plan. Like, it doesn't preclude you from adding more specifics to things, but it's really hard to track all those metrics over time. There are tools and there are resources and websites and data sources and all of that stuff that should the city want to prioritize that in the future. But it's setting directional targets, I guess, without holding you to having to make staff continually check
Absolutely.
data, making sure you're making progress. So it gives you some flexibility to explain annually at least how well you're making progress towards those things without.
These are all things on top of what people already have to do for work.
Right.
There's like 400 of them.
So, we plan on the social media posts, but we also will be posting to the Plan Ferndale website. We will be working with communications on all the other communications methods. We will make note to send emails specifically to both invite the steering committee to come to the adoption meetings, to invite the participants in the community summit to upcoming opportunities to provide feedback. Are there any other ways of spreading the word that you want to make sure we know about?
And I also believe that the communications manager said that in the next, forgive me if you already said that, but the newsletter that goes out to all the residents, we will be just have an update on there.
Yep, Kara's got it in there, yep.
I can't remember, does the city use Nextdoor? There's a different group of people that use
doesn't,
Nextdoor.
I don't think directly.
Okay.
So how some utilities, like consumers will be like, hey, by the way, there's an outage.
Yeah.
I think that if one is on Nextdoor, it would be great to share a link to your Nextdoor neighborhoods because everyone has their settings differently for which neighborhood groups. So I know that we've got a list of all the neighborhood groups that Kara has been developing relationships with, but if you're on Nextdoor, we would love it. So when we send out that plan and opportunities for comment for you to share it there, and again,
There's a different group of people
There
that
definitely
use
is.
Nextdoor that use other social media
Yep.
sites.
And I know they've done it for different projects, but the street signs, the simple signs that you put at like major corners or like parks, that I think is a good idea with everyone walking.
QR codes, I
Yeah,
like the
QR code
idea
would be great, too.
of putting signs in our parks that say, you know,
Scan
Talked
this
about
and
doing that last fall and just ran out of steam, but I think we can.
yeah. Yeah, we've done that before for park surveys.
Ferndale.
It works great.
Did we end up doing them?
Yeah, we did it for Plant Ferndale. That was one of the Coolick Center for 10 months.
Yep.
Okay, I thought, we were gonna do something else. We were gonna do these boards that were like, hey, look at this development that happened in the last year. Here are things that like, it was gonna be more than just, but there were actual like little signs, like, do you know if they were generic enough
We could reuse.
to be reused? Or was it, hey, join us at the community summit? Right, because Jen designed them all. Let me see what we can do with Kara's team.
They probably don't exist anymore.
No, they were specific to the community
Been
summit.
composted somewhere.
Yeah, right. They were specific to the community summit. Okay. So, I have very specific edits from you right now that I plan on making. Tomorrow's ambitious, let's say Friday. And we're gonna keep refining the action plan. I would encourage you all, is it Christine's email or if you get them, should I tell them to send to you or Christine? They have Christine, we're gonna collect all the comments and make us another collective set of edits. But if you are ready, if you think that the draft with this fine tuning in the next week or so is decent enough to go to council to then authorize distribution for public review, it says take action. It doesn't have to be that formal. You can just be like a yay or nay, like, no, we need more time, we need another meeting, we need to see other drafts. There's not a formal action you take other than, yeah, the draft, like a thumbs up. The draft is good enough we're ready to have council decide if they're ready to authorize it for distribution.
Everyone's looking at me. Yeah, I think council would be ready to accept this.
Right,
Yeah, for the
with
initial
some
review.
fine tuning
Yeah,
still happening.
yeah, if these changes and, I don't know if necessarily our, like tweaking of that needs to take place,
For the action plan,
the action plan, yeah.
I would like to send them a revised action plan too.
I just emailed you guys dates.
Okay.
So
I was
how,
thinking about it, so I did it.
not everyone has been as vocal as others. How is everyone feeling as a commission? Ready? Yes? Yes?
I think if the steering committee's ready, I'm ready.
As an unrelated comment, is this a common format for master plans to take, this like, presentation, like slide deck type?
So, so this is just one piece of we've been doing it a year almost. So, at this point, I think it is actually probably not as common. Oftentimes, communities don't have the budget to have a presentation at this point. So it's really, you just would receive the draft and then we would go through the process. So, yeah.
Okay. Yeah, I was surprised when I got this one in the email after seeing just the sheet that was basically the action plan or the tables of the thing. So I think it looks really good. I was just surprised that it looked like it does.
Oh, I'm sorry. I maybe didn't understand your question. Do you mean the actual plan of how graphic it is?
Yes.
Or, okay. Our previous plan, I don't know how familiar you are, was fairly graphic. And I think that's just the newer style for documents in general. But yeah, I think they did a really great job.
Yeah, I thought it seemed a lot more approachable.
Yeah, we tried really, really hard and went way over on time and budget to make it look that way. Yep, so I'll credit Studio Incognito with creating like the brand that complements your existing brand, but we were charged through the RFP and through our own personal motivation to make it super approachable and easy to use. The previous plan was, and we just took it one step further
Absolutely it was.
with the infographics and everything.
We were actually the first community to have an actual action plan as part of our correct me if I'm wrong, as part of our master plan. Generally,
Every
master
plan-
plans don't have,
they're supposed to.
oh, really?
Yeah. Every plan I've ever worked on or reviewed. There are a couple that haven't, that we've then added them, but most of them, that's
Isn't it part of the Michigan Planning Enabling Act?
it
There's
talks
some
about
portion of it.
implementation strategies.
Yeah.
And all the best practices in my 15 years of working have been for it to be an actual plan.
Yeah, but it usually doesn't have specific tasks.
It does, but,
Really?
and I would argue that
Yeah,
your
I'm seeing the
previous
wrong
one
one.
was, your action plan was not as specific as I write them in the last plan. So we're trying to make it more specific now.
Interesting.
Yeah, there was some vague stuff in there. I'm like, what does this mean? I'll send you the Excel, Kate, with my comments. Like, maybe you can provide some, I'm being serious, like the context from the last plan, because I don't understand what they meant.
So, I mean, as somebody who reviewed 80 master plans in a previous job, for Northwest Michigan, some of them, I mean, the older plans, yeah, they're not as implementation and action heavy, and certainly not like graphic, and it was
Right.
more surface text. So this is like above and beyond, and,
The trend has been more graphic, less words, and fewer pages. We tried to keep the pages low on this. It's longer than I wanted it to be, but we had a lot we wanted to say, and show. But I mean, a lot of old plans were really heavy on existing conditions. Like, here's the way the community is now, and we're like, dude, we want to talk about what it's going to be in the future. So that's why we really like flip it on its end, and don't include a ton on the data, because, like you said, like, how much weight do you place on SEMCOG projections? And you're a built-out community. Let's talk about what that actually means. So I'd say the trajectory of plans in the years that I've been working on them has been that, more graphic, more specific. And like I said, you had an action plan in your old plan, but you didn't have an implementation strategy. You might have 2 plans ago, I'm not sure, but
Wrote that one ourselves.
probably not. Right, right.
That was during the Great Recession, and we wrote it.
Right, when I, was working with Sarah on stuff. So yeah, I would say, look at that implementation strategy, because we want to make sure we're capturing the nuance of how things work in Ferndale. That goes to staff too.
any, final comments or questions or feedback for Kathleen, either on the plan or on the schedule, for adoption? Well, thank you so much, Kathleen. It was really wonderful to have you here tonight to go over the draft. It looks really great, and I think it's in a really great shape to get moving to our public review period. And we'll certainly be sending you edits as we continue to comb through
Yeah.
the details.
It would be great, because, let's just do the math here, the June 13th council meeting. It would be great if you could send us any final comments by the end of this week, first thing Monday morning, so that we can turn them around in time to get Kyle new drafts by the 9th.
And so that would be if we want any edits incorporated into the public review draft. However, there is.
You can still provide comments during the public review process,
Thank you
yes.
for clarifying.
Okay. Is it usually more, even sooner than the 9th, like the 7th or 8th? It would be great if you could if you have time to get us comments, so that on Monday morning, we can knock out the edits and get Kyle a draft ASAP next week. Okay, thank you. Kyle will confirm that packet deadline.
Chair, can I ask another process question? I don't know why I'm this person tonight. For feedback, so when we've had these types of citywide notice situations, we've had hard copies of things available for review at City Hall and the library. Will there be a page of that hard copy that says how to provide, is there a way to provide feedback on the draft plan that is not online,
Yeah.
other than coming to the meeting, which is there's why there's 2 public hearings, come to the meeting. I'm just wondering, like, is there a form you can turn into the
Yeah,
library?
we could do like a little like postcard or something, like comment card.
Yeah,
That could be pretty
kind of
easy.
where I was going.
I'll ask Kara.
Thinking about the really heavy traffic at the library since they've reopened. Maybe have people who can easy enough get online and make a comment, or you may have people who want to try to call someone, but just knowing our staffing constraints here at the moment, like, what do you do? Maybe the answer is you come to the public hearing, which is also what public hearings are for.
Yeah, and maybe we,
How you're thinking about the hard copies.
we had office hours that were attended, not a lot, but enough that that was an option, and, but that was Zoom.
Yep.
Yeah, let us brainstorm with city staff on what they might be willing to.
Library has just like so come back to life now that people can come. back to
Right,
it.
right. Yeah,
I know how hard in person has been. So.
All right, any other comments or questions? All right, thank you so much. We appreciate it. Thanks for all your hard work on this.
thank you. Thank you for all your thoughtful feedback. It's helpful. We appreciate it.
All right, we look forward to getting through the process. Will we be seeing you again then, probably?
I think I can't remember, yeah, the public hearing, I think, and one, TBD.
Okay.
I can always just show up on my own time and hang out with y'all since I'm right around the corner.
Well, of course, we'd always appreciate that, but would not expect it. But we
I can't
do hope to
remember.
see you again soon.
Right, I will be back. I think it's the plan, I think it's the public hearing and one, I have to double check.
Okay, thank you so much. All right. Moving on to, do we have any administrative items, Kyle? All right, commission items. My first one is, mostly because I had a scheduling or agenda goof tonight, but just a question. Sorry, kind of maybe a silly one, but on the layout of our agenda, I think it's, I mean, just always been this way, and I'm used to it, I suppose. And I can just get used to making sure to do the call of audience in the future without former Chair Baker
It
having
looks
to.
like there's nothing
announce
under it.
Well, yeah, it looks like there's nothing else under it, but also when we say, well, this is on the agenda, it also seems like we have a public hearing at old business because it's stated on the agenda. It just, is there a reason for that? Could we just consolidate it to remove those items, or?
I think it's part of the template. Well, you'd be able to answer that because you create it.
Yeah, I mean, everything gets auto-generated, so I don't know. I can look into deleting these if we don't have any items.
Would anyone be opposed to that? I mean, because if we don't have a public hearing or old business or new business, does it need to be on the agenda?
Agree with that?
Okay, sounds like we're all on board with that, if you don't mind.
Yeah, I'll look into it. I don't want
Oh, it's
to,
the software.
yeah, I don't want to break anything in Granicus, but I can definitely check it out.
All right, well, it's understandable if that's the reason, I can certainly live with that.
I'm 98% sure that it's just a template, because everyone enters in what they want to put on the agenda, and then when the agenda's generated, it just takes those pieces and throws it into the agenda and, you know, takes the attachments, and that's how we get it online.
Is there a radio button for like, no old business?
Well, no, because if you don't assign it to no old business, and just nothing goes under it.
Right, so it would probably clutter it up then if we just added no old business, just to show that there
Yeah.
was, it would make it
You would have
like
to put an
doubly
entry
worse.
in that said no business.
Right.
I have some ideas.
Okay, and no worries if it's, we just stay with how we've done it forever. And then also, I was just thinking, so the public comment that we received during our call to audience about the fence, we oftentimes include language in our conditions about fencing that the applicant work with their neighbors to determine the appropriate type of fence. But we typically only do that when someone actually comes and voices an opinion. We don't make it a, like, general kind of rule that we, but I think that there's potentially some language that we can include in our conditions about fences that would allow for the adjustment of the condition with, if there is future comment from neighbors. Because in this instance, we approved a site plan with specific condition language, and it's already done with. But if we had some flexibility in that condition language, city staff would be able to make that adjustment. And I think that there is also some ability for some minor,
That was my hope, was that it could be changed administratively.
I think it can be changed administratively, but I think that it would be probably helpful for staff if they had that, I mean, because this is going to be changing from a 5-foot vinyl to potentially an 8-foot masonry. I mean, that was the request, which is a significant budgetary expense. And so if staff doesn't have anything to stand on, that could be quite difficult for them. Is that very honest?
My thought on it was that at this point, this would be a communication with the developer, and if they said no, thank you, then,
Yeah.
you know, we don't really have any other,
Full leg to stand on.
we already waived the material. So, but if they said, sure, that's all right, we want to be good neighbors, then my hope was that that would be a small enough change that it could be made administratively. But I didn't know the answer to that.
I believe that is correct.
What about balconies, though?
But I think if we do just have, maybe,
The transept, it's the
as
same-
we do our conditions,
back, one bedroom on the front.
Yeah.
as we do our conditions for fences, though, I think that we can provide that
I
language
agree,
that
yeah,
allows
yeah,
that.
Yeah, definitely. That makes sense.
Well, in regards to the balconies, and I respect, the individual's, thoughts and concerns on that, but what's the difference if someone's standing on a balcony or standing outside their window, standing in their window and looking out their window? The building is also far enough back from the wall, so it's not, you're not looking over,
And the
into
size
their
of, the size of
yards.
the balconies, you're not gonna have a big party going on.
Exactly,
You know,
yeah.
Well, also, you have property rights for the residents that are on the site as well. I mean, I know that they're creating this nuisance, not coming to it, but it's a pretty common property right to be able to have that open space. And that's something that we also request in terms of our master plan and our zoning ordinance. And I think that when you don't have something, the thought of that change can make it seem like it's going to be more of a nuisance than it ultimately ends up becoming. But
Through the chair, if they were right near the lot line, like I think about Vester Square and where that alley comes in, and they didn't put any balconies, sort of toward their Breckenridge neighbors, they were close, right? This is,
You have like 3 lanes
30,
of parking.
40 feet.
Yeah,
yeah,
probably, yeah, at least, right?
Yeah.
Probably like 3 lanes of parking and through lanes.
and
Yep.
through lanes, yeah. It's gotta be 40, it's gotta be 40
They're like, they
feet.
were 16-foot parking spaces, and it's gonna
50
be at
feet.
least 12 for the through
Yeah.
lanes, so.
Yeah.
20 for the,
70 feet, 80 maybe with the sidewalk and.
Maybe
buffer.
that's where, Greg, you can reach out about your planting on private property and see about maybe helping them all plant trees in the back too.
There's no wires
Yeah.
back there.
It didn't look like there was.
I don't recall.
I
Everything
know,
else in the-
I just know how sensitive we are when property lines are tight, when we think about balconies and noise. Because we talked about it on the Livernois project potentially, we talked about it on Vester Square, we talked about it at Iron Ridge even, and that was a pretty big setback from the neighbors, but the neighbors were here to talk about it, and, yeah, this one, yeah, what did Rachel say? I mean, we're like 40 feet, like, there's a lot of distance.
it's also right behind 9 Mile. I mean, and so I think that we also, maybe this is because we're coming off of, master plan discussion, but just in terms of, so, we were also hearing it from like NIMBYs, or, in these specific instances, but this is, maybe I'm too tired to finish this thought, but I just think that, I think I would like a better conversation of hearing of a general, like, is this actually okay if it's in general versus if it's in your backyard? What kind of actual concerns should we be considering? But then also being able to weigh that against the benefit and the, you know, the value, but also the open space that it provides to individual residents and, you know, those sorts of things. So just looking at both sides, I guess.
In regards to the wall, though, and I know that you're really, really busy, but is there opportunity for you to reach out to the resident and maybe she could get signatures from the other neighbors that are along the wall, and then have a conversation with the developer and just say, you know, this, because if it's just coming from one resident, you don't know, you know, I'm not saying she's a liar, but you don't know if the other residents are as equally concerned, you know, about the fact that it's a vinyl fence, you know, as much as this resident is. And so maybe there's an opportunity for her to, you know, kind of petition the neighbors that are along there to get some signatures, and then for them to meet with the developer, her to meet, you know, with you, with the developer to say, could you do this for us, you know, and have that conversation, because there isn't much that we can do from our end. It's already been approved. I wish she had been, you know, able to make the meeting when we did approve it, to have that conversation. I don't think, you know, from what the developer has done to date and the changes that he's been willing to make, you know, he seems, you know, amenable to changes, and maybe they can meet halfway on something.
It really was. I thought it was a great comment about the grading issue as well, in terms of the height of the fence.
I agree. That was very perceptive and not something that I picked up on that site plan.
Yeah.
Because off-site, I didn't get that sense of the difference between on-site and off-site. So that, yeah, that was really helpful. It's
I
actually
thought that
similar to
property
Taco
was-
Bell on 9 Mile.
I thought that property's higher. So if you had a 6-foot wall,
Depends what the finished grade's gonna be.
Right.
That's what they're excavating down
Fair,
to.
with the grade difference though between the fence and the building too. The building will be at a lower
Since it's
elevation than the
see, I
rear
think
of the site.
because that property is so much higher up, I figured
not
they're
gonna
just
change
gonna level it down to some grade. They're not gonna go lower than what the,
And there, I mean, then there's grading requirements for pavement, I just don't remember all.
oh,
potentially another issue.
I'd trust her
Have
on
a
that one.
significant amount of material to haul off site.
yeah. That's why I figured they just build themselves up and just have a higher land. That way, if you had a 4-foot wall on the other side, it'd actually be like, you know,
House and the little building.
because you'd be higher up.
Thinking actually.
They could put like an earthen wall
Yeah.
cut down, I don't remember what.
There's a lot of dirt there. Gonna need a lot of grading.
Any other commission
They can move it into
items?
the parks.
I'm sorry, Chair Foster, did we determine that we were going to ask Kyle to reach out to let the developer know that we'd received this feedback? Encourage the property owner to get some documentation from her neighbors to support her comment, and then see if the developer would willingly make the change on the fence? Is that the sense that?
Yeah, to my understanding, Kyle, you gave her your information, but it didn't sound like she reciprocated. But to the extent that you can, or if she reaches out, could you make that clear?
Sure.
Thank you.
And then in terms of her conversation about balconies, I think it should at least be shared with the developer so that he knows, but I don't know that we have any room to like make the request, but
Yeah.
I think he should pass on if we feel. Otherwise, she might bring it up and then he'll be blindsided. Okay, makes sense.
I thought she gave her address on the.
She did on
she
the
did.
record.
So it's, I think it should be on there.
I just wrote Withington.
Any other commission items this evening?
Nope, I'm just happy to report that Paxton is gonna be paved starting June 5th.
Oh, good.
I know. That
Those
cow
potholes,
path.
those potholes by Marshall are getting so bad right now.
It's,
A lot of them are getting redone too, which is nice.
it needed it 5 years ago, so I'm so glad.
All right, well, if there are no other commission items, then we will adjourn at 9:22. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.